But they're here.
Yes, they are. We could probably do the AMO delegations.
Okay, let's just get me started here. So we'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting of June the 28th to order. And anybody has a declaration of pecuniary interest, they can bring it forward now or later. We'll start with point 3, which is the business arising from the minutes. Association of Municipalities is what we're going to be discussing here, and that the following delegation requests be submitted for the 2018 Association of Municipalities of Ontario AMO Conference. Put that on the floor. Councillor Barfoot, seconder Councillor Bell. Have we had a discussion as to where we would like to go on this, Madam CEO, or are we probably limited to 3, or?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We discussed this briefly at our last meeting with regard to if there were specific delegations that any of you wish to have us put forward. I did have a discussion with the local CAOs earlier this week. We did go through a number of items, and so I'll be looking for your feedback on those. Some of these have come up in the past. We spoke about speaking with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care with regard to ongoing stable funding for community paramedicine and perhaps enhancements to that. We also talked about proposing that they take action on aligning the LIN boundaries with municipal boundaries, or at a minimum, at least ensuring that there's cross-border planning for service delivery taking place. So that was one item. Another item that came up earlier this year had to do with enhanced funding for the conservation authorities. I think Saugeen Valley brought that forward. It went forward to the province as part of the municipal election. And so a question about whether or not you wish to pursue that any further. Those were the kind of the two main ones that count, yes.
Yes, okay, so the CEO has given you a starting point anyhow. Yes, Councillor Barfoot.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Actually, timely, we had Grace Albo Conservation Authority yesterday, and for the members here that are on that, we were asked by Grace Albo if Grey County could put in for a delegation request to discuss that. So more I thought of it last night, it should be obviously for all the conservation authorities, so we would include obviously Nottawasaga and Saugeen and any other ones that were there. So I think that would be, would advise that, you know, if Grey County could do that, and it would be within the Treasury, is what our thought was from the meeting yesterday with the Treasury Department then, or Minister of Finance, would be better than going through any of the other ministries, because they're the actual ones that do the funding part. So I would suggest that that could be one of the ones to go along with what was suggested.
So everybody concur that that would be a good ministry to approach, the Ministry of Finance, with regard to increased funding for conservation authorities and any other issues, and that all the conservation authorities that are in Grey County be asked to join us. So that's a lock and load then on that one.
If you were going to see finance, we do have the option always when we put forward a delegation with a particular ministry to indicate as many as 3 different items that you want to cover off in that time, although in 15 minutes talking about 3 different things is sometimes challenging. There was the issue earlier this year with regard to farm tax and assessment on the farm properties, whether or not you'd like us to work on something to bring that discussion forward if we were going to see finance. Or not, as the case may be, yes.
Councillor McQueen.
Well, I certainly think that would be something that, I mean, we flogged that dog about, what, 7 or 8 years ago with regards to that, and it just seemed to be in blank look, but certainly I see that there's no reason why we wouldn't start that dialogue again, because I think it was, a report came out a number of years ago where the shortfall, even just for the county of Gray, in the sense of the finance part of where that was as far as what we used to get or what should have been allocated. I know it's the own funding, it's sort of rolled up there, but I think there's certainly a good time to start that dialogue maybe. If you're going to be in front of the Minister of Finance, it certainly doesn't hurt to put that plug in there to at least have that thought. Maybe don't get too big in depth, but just sort of put that in there that we're looking forward. Yeah, a little preamble there.
So that would be added to the, that first delegation, then, as, if you're allowed 3 points. So we got that captured. Okay, any other suggestions? Yes, Councilor Barfoot, and then Councilor.
I guess just some clarification on what we would be asking for on that. We're asking to go back to the old system where everybody pays and then reimbursed, or I guess I'm a little confused what we're going to be asking for in that one.
Well, that certainly needs clarification, so, yes.
I would say just a high level, Councillor Barfoot, in a sense of, own funding, and it's been an argument that municipalities with farms in there, just to have that idea of having a conversation around that, maybe not going to the depth. I'm just saying, like just make them aware of what used to be or how it was, and we feel that there has been a miscalculation in the old funding on that farm tax rebate program, because as we know, the 25% used to be a provincial program. But the thing is, it's all got transferred back to the municipality, and it's a shift within your, but it's a provincial program. And maybe to state at a high level, it's a provincial program, and we feel that from a municipal side, it's not equitable. And maybe keep it high level, just to sort of, I just throw that out there.
If I could, Ed, I would suggest that perhaps simply stating very factually, these are the issues that have been raised, and the kind of response that they're looking to us as an upper tier municipality in response to those issues, and maybe some of the difficulties that poses for us in dealing fairly with all of our property taxpayers.
Okay. Good. You can sort of encapsulate some wonderful words there with the CAO. John, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Warden. I'm just wondering, I'm going back to a presentation we had from Ron Kerr of Burnsides about a month or so ago regarding some of the traffic issues, in the eastern part of Grey County. And if you take a look at the long-term plan for MTO in 26, especially with the development in the eastern part, and trying to get a corridor across the top of the county from east to west, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a delegation to the MTO to say, that rather than spend the money on four-laning Highway 26 at Craigleith with the barrier and spending millions of dollars down there, to take a look at the really long-term plan and kept that east-west highway up over the hill in one of the suggested corridors that the MTO already has identified. I just think that for getting the traffic, especially across east to west of Grey County, that we're going to need that, and you can't bottleneck 26 highway and that bottleneck at Thornbury and that bridge, and then have them continue on to Meaford and Endo and Sound. Like at some point in time, the MTO's got to take a real serious look at putting a different highway system in up over there to come across the top of that. And I think that it would be a great thing for Grey County as well as Blue Mountain and the other municipalities on the east side especially, but all of them for that matter, to get the traffic up into Owen Sound and the peninsula, to take a look and make a deputation to Grey or to the MTO to take a look at this for the long term. Don't spend tens of millions of dollars down in Craigleith for a solution that you've already identified is only 15 years.
So create a long-range plan.
A longer range plan, and
least
if nothing else, acquire the land and allow the county forces and the municipal forces to be able to be in the loop with that, so that we know that these sections of road, I'm going to use the word, are going to be uplifted from Grey County to the Highway Department, the MTO, and so that we know and Grey County knows what we have to be doing in that corridor.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Eccles?
So further on to that, and I don't know whether there's been much discussion at the Western Wardens Caucus, but I've certainly read a number of articles, and there seems to be a push for an extension of the 400 series highway. And quite frankly, it's being pushed because of Bruce Power and development in the eastern part of Grey County and even right across to into Simcoe, about having a 400 series highway come up through southwestern Ontario from the 401 at London, somewhere in there, the 402, coming up through Huron, Middlesex, Huron, into Bruce County, across Grey and into Simcoe. Would that be a time, and I don't know whether the Western Wardens have had much discussion about that, but is it a time to, further of what John is saying, get a lot better idea of where our provincial highway system is going? We've got a 10-year corporate capital. Maybe the province could give us a bit better idea of what's on the 20 or 25-year provincial capital.
Thanks for that. And I think we need to talk to MTO about long-range 25, 50-year planning. And I have heard, but the Western Wardens haven't talked about that quarter, but I know there's been some chatter, people asking for it, but I also heard one time that they were going to build a bridge from Tobermory north. So there's all kinds of rumors. So I think we need to distill or get the facts. So I think that's probably a good thing to have a look at. The other thing is, and that would be done with the MTO transportation. One of the things, and John is that I don't know whether our CEO, but we have been promised a $1.85 million thing. Should we be discussing how that's going to come forward for our local transportation system? So I think we could probably come up with 3 items for the Ministry of Transportation, and one is including John's thinking, which really includes really long-range thinking that will impact Grey County. So, John, you had some comments?
Yeah, just to go hand in hand with that, and I think the problem that they're experiencing is obviously one of the bigger ones. Minor to that would be what we're experiencing on Highway 10, and again, as Kevin said, looking down the road, the capacity, it's starting to get pretty bad now, and so with all the homes and things coming in, it's something that should be looked at now for down the road. So if that could be included as part of it, that would be very helpful.
Well, I think it would be all our corridors that, as part of that grand thinking. Councillor McQueen.
So, thank you, Mr. Warden. Just at the start of, I know, Madam CAO, you talked about the Ministry of Health with regards to funding and stuff. I don't see it on the list up there. But just as a sort of a brief part, I know my Grey Highlands, the town of Blue Mountains, and others around the Collingwood area had a meeting last week with regards to the bigger plan for expanding the Collingwood Hospital and more like the South Georgian Bay Regent area. And I know that's something that some of the thought process at that discussion, it's a newer forum that's set up that the 5 municipalities that surround the Collingwood Hospital, mayor and CAO attend twice a year forum to talk about the area and the region. But I know from a perspective of more so Blue Mountains than Grey Highlands, but they are looking at looking at the future of expanding or building a new hospital in the Southern Georgian Bay Area, not necessarily the Collingwood Hospital, but in that region, how that region is continuing to grow, which we see part of that region is in Grey County. I'm not sure if that's something that if you were having that delegation with the Minister of Health, which I don't see on the list there, but I think that would be something as a one-liner is that we're aware of I know they are going to make a delegation to AMO, whether they're acceptable or not. That was some of the conversations that we had. But certainly just to comment that the awareness of that area and that region and their striving to look at the future of healthcare in that region as the South Georgian Bay Area, and it even extends up to, part of even to Meaford. I know Meaford has their hospital, but that whole area is expanding and it's looking at the future growth. And we know with the ski hill and stuff in the wintertime and and the demand that does put on that area's hospital, I mean, it is a sort of a portion of Grey County on that southern Georgian Bay region. So I don't know if a one-liner just, oh yeah, by the way, we understand that there is development going on. And certainly, I think at some time they're going to make a presentation to the county of Grey also on their plans in that region. So they'll probably be reaching out to you, Madam CAO, with regards to a delegation for that too.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just further to Councillor McKean's proposal, it's probably 10, 12 years ago, there was a meeting, meetings at the time, and I attended those, and they were in Collingwood, and there was some drawings that were presented. And I don't know if we still have copies of those or if you've seen those, but the proposal was to come across south of Clarksburg, Thornbury, and reconnect with 26. And I think, Kim, maybe you would be at that meeting at the time with Collingwood. So do you remember that, any of those meetings?
I think I'm looking at, we'll have to have a bit of an investigation and see if we
Okay.
can pull back
Because it would be,
It'd be good to start from the
Sure.
place.
it'd be unfortunate to reinvent the wheel if you've already got something that was proposed at the time. The ballpark figure that was thrown out at that time was possibly $60 million. It was a big, big project, as you can imagine, because what was proposed, took some really big thinking. But if we still had some of that, those drawings or presentations, that would be beneficial, I think.
Thanks for that, Councillor Pringle. Yes, Councillor Klumpus.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Following up on number 5 issue there, expanding hospitals with the Ministry of Health, we really don't know what is going to come down the pike in terms of our new provincial government and how this is going to impact programs that are currently in place. And I think one of the ones that is making me a little bit nervous here is the increased funding for our own Grey Bruce Health Services that has come as a result of work with the past government. And we certainly don't want to see that go back to the way it was and to the challenges that presented to the 6 sites in Grey Bruce that are funded this way. Is it appropriate now, or is this a time that maybe we look at this kind of thing at the Roma conference in February next year when we have a better handle on maybe what programs and things are going to be coming forward? Down the road, we'll see how all of this unveils, but I think this is something that we need to keep in mind as well, that we cannot lose that additional funding that has been prescribed to our Grey Bruce Health Services to maintain these 6 sites that we do have in Grey County.
I agree with you. That's certainly a concern. Also, another concern is in long-term care and whether or not the province will consider increased funding for long-term care because of there's a lot of, let's say, desire to improve the service, to the people that are in our homes. And so there was a bill 133 that was brought forward. I think it's still, being discussed, but that would be to improve the amount of money that goes for long-term care. So I think that should be on our radar as well as increased funding, as long with what you're saying, stabilize funding for the hospitals in our area.
If I may,
Yes.
just one other thought, since we're building a list here that maybe not necessarily for this AMO meeting coming up, but certainly as we approach the rest of the year, one of the hard-fought battles was to increase the funding for rural schools and of educational, assessment of what funding is appropriate for rural schools. We did get a message from the then Minister of Education, that this would be an increased formula. We can't lose sight of that either, because we're all very, very rural community, and that's important to us as we move forward. So if we could just add that to the long-term list of things that to keep in the focus.
Thanks, Barbara, on that. Yes. Yes.
Well, it's coming later in the agenda. Well, it's probably appropriate, thank you for reminding me to add it here. Later on today, when we talk about the Sydenham School situation, I think there's an opportunity there to delegate on that as well.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor McQueen.
Just as a high level, I mean, we got to put things in perspective is, we have a new government, a brand-new cabinet's going to be announced tomorrow, the 29th. And, you know, don't be surprised if we don't get all our requests in, because there's going to be a lot of people wanting to speak to the new government. So certainly moving forward to February is certainly a good strategy also to moving up. But saying that, it's always, you know, everybody's going to be jockeying to try to get in front of those new ministers to try to put their post stamp in front of their, you know, on their wall to make sure that these are items that are very important for us. So it's going to be interesting moving forward, and certainly there's going to be a lot of delegation requests for that. One is, I think, make sure the things are still in place, and two is everybody has a wish list that they wish to talk about. So stay tuned on that one, I think. So I think if we're lucky, and if we get one or two or whatever, I think we have to be conscious that it's sort of that first level. We're not going to get into a whole lot of detail in the sense, it's, you know.
Thanks for that. Okay, so do we need a motion there?
We have a motion, we just need it voted on.
Okay, so the following delegation requests, is that sufficient, those 5? Okay, so there's the list of 5 items there, which our staff will sort of bring together and polish it up for the presentation to each one of the ministries for our application. So do I have that on the floor yet?
Yep, Councillor Bell and Councillor.
Okay, so, all right, so that being said, no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Yes, Councillor Eccles, you have further discussion.
Well, I guess, you know, we've got something in there about the highways and MTO. We've got 2 kind of pilot projects right now that, for rural transportation.
Right.
And I don't know how philosophical we want to get or how high level, but is there still going to be the continued funding for the rural transportation? Obviously, the bus route from Owen Sound to Shelburne, the proposed or bus route from into the Blue Mountains, whether it starts in Port Elgin or starts out at Springmount, I'm not sure where, and heads east. And certainly from Owen Sound, or does it start at Tobermory and go to Guelph or onto the train at Guelph? But maybe it's more so not that, but what is
Rural transportation.
rural transportation, but what is the rural difference? And I think that was to Councillor Klumpus. We've always said that, you know, you can't treat rural schools like you do urban schools. You can't treat rural transportation like you do urban transportation. And there's a split, and I think the provincial government at some point, obviously June 7th, indicated that the past government didn't get it. Is this government, what is their plan on that? There's 2 sections, and they've got to be looked at differently.
So we've opened up the vault here and put in section 4 to cover that off, so thanks for that addition.
Well, that's stable funding for community paramedicine and Ministry of Health, but rural transportation, but it's not the rural lens per se, you know.
Well, rural transportation with a rural lens?
Well, it's rural transportation, but it's rural schooling. It's, you
well,
know, there's a lot of other, it's that difference. If we just focused on one small thing, but it, you know, do we go a little bit larger?
Well, I think
Incorporate
we
that
can-
in all of them, really.
I think we can craft that rural lens through anything that we look at, so. Yes, Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I just want to comment that when these delegations are taking place, I fully understand and respect that particular individuals should be designated to take the lead role in these delegations, but I also understand that there's nothing precluding other council members from participating as observers, and I would like to see more of that in the interest of everybody being as well informed as possible following these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, they are open, and I think that there's no reason that we need to keep it a secret, so I would agree. I'm not sure that it was a secret before, but it won't be going forward. Thank you. Okay, so let's call the motion. All in favor? John, thank you for your input there. I was, in a moment of pause there in my mind. Okay, so the motion's carried. Thank you very much. Good discussion. I think we're going to have a good presentations there. All right, next is delegations, and we have one of our friends, two of our friends actually, from Making Grey Bruce Home, May Yip and Mukhlis Hassan. So, and Barb's going to introduce them. So, thank you, Barb.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, County Council. I just wanted to provide just a very brief welcome to our friends May and Mukhlis, and acknowledge some previous work community has done that has allowed for this to happen. It's very exciting times for us. We have some previous work that's been happening with a number of partners through a Welcoming Communities initiative, as well as a newcomer network. And what that led to was determining that we really did need to focus on services for people coming into our community. I see Jacinda here. You folks know Jacinda. She has her own economic development related New to Grey initiative, and she works very closely with May and Mukhlis. So I'm really excited to share that we've got some good things happening on Making Grey Bruce Home. So I'd like to welcome them.
Thank you for that, Barb. Welcome, May. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. So, good morning, Warden Halliday and councillors. It is a pleasure to be here this morning to give a presentation about Making Grey Bruce Home, so thank you very much for inviting me. My name is May Yip. I am the coordinator of the project. And my coworker, Mukhlis Hassan, who is, he just stand up.
Come on up, Mukhlis. Stand by me there.
Stand by me, okay, stand by me. Mukhlis Hassan, he is the newcomer advocate. And I also have Francesca Dobbin, Executive Director of United Way Bruce Grey, with me today.
Welcome to both of you.
And Francesca's sitting
No, she's looking the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. So, Making Grey Bruce Home is the result of a partnership between United Way Bruce Grey and the Welcoming Community Grey Bruce. And this project is funded by the Government of Ontario through the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration. And recently, we have also received grants from the Community Foundation Grey Bruce and the Power Workers Union. Making Grey Bruce Home is a regional capacity building project to support the social and economic integration of current as well as anticipated refugees, refugee claimants, and vulnerable newcomers in Grey and Bruce counties. The project started on February 2nd, 2018, and it will end on March 31st, 2019. The goal of the project is to create a settlement service model which not only works for our region, but is also applicable to rural communities in other parts of Ontario. During the lifetime of the project, we will partner with 211 to create a virtual hub of information and resources which helps newcomers to meet settlement needs. We will provide cultural humility training to service providers and refugee sponsors. We are partnering with the Grey County's initiative, New to Grey, in delivering some diversity training to municipalities and employers. We will also be training volunteer mentors whose involvement will go beyond the lifespan of the project. Training toolkits will be developed and distributed to service providers and community organizations. So currently, we are providing direct service for approximately 130 individuals from 12 different countries of origin, such as Syria, Iran, Iraq, Eritrea, China, Korea, Japan, and East India. Some of the languages spoken by our service recipients are Arabic, Spanish, Tigrinya, Mandarin, Kurdish, and Japanese. So just to give everybody an idea, according to the 2016 census, there are 40 different languages recorded as mother tongue being spoken at home. So Gray County is actually a lot more diverse culturally than we could see. These individuals that we are working with are refugees, new immigrants, and international students. We have been getting referrals from service providers, existing recipients, and community members. We also take proactive approach by making ourselves visible in the community through participating in various events and offering drop-in at our community space on Wednesdays for newcomers to come and get assistance and for people in the community to learn more about our project and find out how they can help. We also offer programs in partnership with service providers and community groups at our space, as well as in their venues. Making Grey Bruce Home identifies the settlement needs of our newcomers and connects them with resources. When service gap is discovered, we facilitate service providers and community groups to collaborate on inventing ways to fill the gap. The most common settlement needs among the newcomers that we're working with are learning the language, finding work and receiving vocational training or transferring their vocational skills, dealing with schools and childcare services, and reconnecting to healthcare services that they need. And also, and one part is quite important is getting into the community, starting to connect with people in the community to make them feel at home. Volunteer mentors play a very important role in the rural community settlement model. Making Grey Bruce Home recruits volunteers, engage them in various small projects and programs, and provide training to help them develop skills and knowledge in helping vulnerable newcomers. So I would like to finish up this presentation with a little story. Some of the Syrian families we work with used to own and operate farms back home, and Moklas here has been working with a lot of them for over 2 years now since they arrived, and he will be able to tell you more about these families and the others. And so this spring, we reserved 2 beds in the Owen Sound Community Garden, which is managed by the Canadian Mental Health Association, to let the farmers get their hands in the soil. The purpose of this little project is to help the newcomers build self-confidence by engaging in vocational activities that they are good at, and to provide them with the opportunity to connect with people in the community. Ibrahim was the first one to come on board. We have a volunteer photo documenting Ibrahim's gardening experience. She chatted with him last week, and this is what she learned. Ibrahim has 15 years of farming experience in Syria that he is hoping to put in use here in Canada. Meanwhile, he is gardening at the Owen Sound Community Garden, growing eggplants, radishes, greens, and herbs, and some really amazingly healthy tomatoes. He feeds these tomatoes some natural fertilizers and has built trellises to help them climb and support the fruits. Ibrahim has also lent a hand to other community gardeners, helping them build and support their plots as well. Although Ibrahim is the only one actively involved in the garden, the other farmers in the Syrian families are inspired and have been researching the possibility to get back into their old trade. From time to time, myths and misconceptions about refugees and immigrants surface in our community. They steal our jobs. They are putting burden on our social services, people say. The reality is quite the contrary. When newcomers are given opportunities and support to settle and establish, they become the driving force behind the creation of a healthy community. Making Grey Bruce Home assists communities throughout the region in developing and strengthening the skills, instincts, abilities, processes, and resources to aid the settlement of refugees and vulnerable newcomers so that they can settle and establish, and consequently contribute to a healthy community. Thank you for the audience.
Thank you very much, May and Moklas. It's great to see you. We encourage you, and we thank you for your dedication, and it's a great idea. I'm glad you're working with Jacinda out there on the newcomer program. So good luck, and if you need any further help from the county, you'll let us know, and good luck. And we'll see you. You up on Saturdays? Wednesday?
Yes.
All right. So then everybody
6.
make note and visit on Wednesdays and say hello to May and Moklas. Yes, Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just to clarify, when you said 40 mother tongues, were you referring just to Grey County?
Just Grey County, yes.
Thank you.
That's from the census, right? Yes, Councillor McKeon.
Briefly, Mr. Warden, and thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned about the agricultural side, and I know I talked to Jacinda about this a few months back, where you talk about those that have farm experience or agricultural experience. I know there's a lot of farmers in Grey County that are consolidating farms, and they have farmhouses. A lot of those farmhouses have lots of land around them. You talk about starting to grow gardens and do that kind of thing. Has there been any further conversation or with the agricultural community in Grey County with regards to the possibility of maybe not just, but for housing and that kind of thing? And I know I haven't talked to Jacinda since I spoke to her about that a few months back, but housing, I'm sure, is maybe of some interest, but certainly in the agricultural side in the rural of Grey County, farm help is always a struggle too. So I don't know if there's been a conversation and the ability there or the ability of there's always, like I said, a lot of the farmhouses through consolidation, and that's farmers buying up more farms and having these farmhouses on hand looking for tenants and stuff like that. But has there been that conversation?
Yes, actually, we talk just about like now the language barrier because they are attending ESL and they don't speak English very well. And this where like we find the issue, but they are like really interested like to start on, and this where I'm taking them this weekend to Shelburne. I have one friend, he's a successful farmer, and he said like, let's meet with them and see what they are thinking. And
Follow-up, I mean, we do have the Ag office at Markdale, and Ray Robertson, who's sort of part of that. I would suggest that maybe that information be forwarded, that you have that conversation with Ray Robertson.
yeah, I love to have this contact.
Because that Ag office represents a lot of commodity groups also in agricultural commodity groups in Grey County. So I think to have that conversation is probably a good thing.
Be great.
Well, perhaps we'll get some synergy between those two, and you'll take the lead on that, and we'll have Ray and May Yip, okay, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the suggestion, Councillor McQueen, for expanding the agricultural part of their operation. Thank you very much for coming. See you soon. Thanks, Jacinda. Okay, the next item on our list is Wellington Waterloo Community Futures, Rick Whitaker. And Kevin, you're going to lead the way here, so.
Yep. Good morning, County Council. Good morning, Warden. It's my pleasure to introduce Rick Whitaker. He's the project lead for the Community Paramedic Remote Patient Monitoring Program. We've been a part of this program since 2015 when we first started. It was one of our initial projects along with our home visit program. And across the province, there really isn't a lot of data when you involve universities. We're still waiting on our data from the University of Toronto, but Queen's has put this out now, and we also have McMaster. So it's nice to have this bona fide data to support our program. Again, we were lucky to be a part of this. As far as one of the first 3 municipalities, there was Grey and Renfrew and Essex County. And it's still, remote patient monitoring is a big part of our program today. And I just want to introduce Rick. He's going to give you the results of the program.
Welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, Warden Halliday and council and staff for inviting me to come and present these results. The program's been running, like Kevin said, for about 2 years, and Mike Muir before Kevin, and Kevin were guinea pigs in this, and I thank them for their patience because there was a lot of ups and downs as we went along. But now we have almost 20 counties that are involved in the program. The program was funded by Canada Health Infoway, and they contributed $1.6 million, and 6 CFDCs in the South Central region from Orillia down to our office in the south contributed about $500,000, and there were 1,100 patients that have actually gone through the program. The program's been extended for 1 more year, and in what Infoway calls the Scale and Spread program, which is trying to bring more patients on and bring more counties on. And so we have funding until March of 2019. I'm going to go through this. There's a lot of data. I've sent it out to you. I'm going to go through fairly quickly so we can have some questions. But generally, what happens is that the paramedics were involved in this program because when we started looking at the 911 calls at the municipal level, there were, this is from Essex County early on, there were 1,600 patients who called between 3 and 10 times a year. Some 46 patients called over 50 times. So there were a lot of patients who were ill and needed to call 911 frequently, and the intent of the program was to see if we could measure a reduction in 911 calls, a reduction in ER visits and hospitalizations. We partnered with the community paramedic program, so the CFDCs weren't interested in keeping seniors in their home longer for economic development reasons, but the paramedics were also at that time looking at community paramedicine. And I think that the results show that the paramedic program, community paramedic program, is actually a very successful program. What the technology does by integrating it into the system is it allows the existing personnel to look at or take care of more patients. So where a typical community paramedic might have 20 or 30 patients on their roster, the technology allows them to triage and look at their patients remotely, which allows them to get up to 60 to, in London right now, they're up to about 100 patients per community paramedic. Paramedics use a very simple dashboard. The data that's, the equipment is read by the patients on a daily basis. If the patient has a reading that's outside of the threshold, the alert comes to the paramedic, and the paramedic can respond to those alerts usually by phone, and so, or else go and visit. 88% of the time, the paramedics can respond to the patient over the phone, which is very efficient. And then if they need to, the 12% of the time, they can go visit the patients out in their home. So I'm going to just go through some data. I'm going to just highlight it. If you, there's a report from Queens, I can send it to you. It's 90 pages long, and it's got just about every kind of analysis you'd want to know about this program. But the highlights are fairly straightforward. There were 650 patients included in the program. Those were the patients who completed the quantitative survey, and then it was also matched with the qualitative data. Patients were fairly evenly matched, 49% to 50.5% for males and females. Average age was 77 years old. Patients, the largest number of patients had COPD, followed by CHF and diabetes. And the one thing that was very impressive about this program was that there was a 90% retention rate, and that's very high for a remote monitoring program across North America or in the world. I think looking at the system that we set up, it's really the combination of the technology but the community paramedic involvement. So the paramedics got to know the patients, and when there were conversations, the patients felt that bond, and the surveys tended to show that information. Out of the people who didn't complete the program, a large majority were deceased. So the patients who are on the program were quite ill, and these are the patients who use the healthcare system quite a bit. Only 3% of the patients said that they didn't want to be in the program after they got on. This data comes from ISIS, the information for, not the ISIS terrorist group, but the data too. So anyway, the information for health organization. On the left side is the socioeconomic status of the patients that were on the program. At least half were very low or low socioeconomically. So that means that they didn't have any very much disposable income, and they were on this program, usually older, so 77 years old, and living kind of on a daily basis. There was a good section, cross-section of urban, suburban, and rural, so we looked and analyzed the differences in there. And on the right side is the John Hopkins diagnosis of patient illness. And this was, Queens provided this. The 78% on the 10-plus score, the average illness ranking for an Ontario person is 3.2. 78% of the patients on this program were 10-plus. So the patients that were on the program were 3 or 4 times anyway higher than the average population. I'll go quickly through this, but this is the qualitative data, and it just shows that 90% of the patients thought the program improved their quality of life, that it helped them self-manage their skills, that helped them progress towards their health goals, and the equipment was easy to use. So that was a very important, 95% said it was easy to use. That's the most important thing for this population, is that the program is very simple. The satisfaction with health care of the paramedics and the program was 98%, so you can't get much better than that. And 86% of the patients suggested that their emergency department usage dropped. On the left side of this graph, you can see that before the program, most people called 911. As the program went on, people, that's the yellow bar, most people started to move away from calling 911 to calling the community paramedic and working with them rather than going directly to the ER. And the other side of this is that we provided a front-facing portal for from the paramedics to the patient's family and caregivers, and that really helped give the patient's families confidence that their family members were being taken care of. We measured this, the 911 data from the 12 months previous, so we were able to gather the 12 months 911 call records prior to being on the program. The green stripe in the middle is the enrollment date, and then you can see the 911 calls on the 6 months after they've been on the program. So many patients had 28, 30 calls before and ER visits. And what happened across the board was that as the patients were in the program for the first month or two, most would still call 911 or go to the ER. But after they got confident that when they were taking their readings and the paramedics were there watching that, they stopped calling 911. So part of it was that they built that bond with the paramedic, but part of it they just became, and this the survey said, they became comfortable knowing that somebody was watching over them. And so most of the people calling 911s with these kind of illnesses just don't know what else to do. The graph just shows we divided the patients up into 4 groups from lowest comorbidities up to the highest. Actually, the highest comorbidity patients had the highest results. So the patients using the system the most had the best results, the biggest return on investment. And that data is there if you want to go through that. Compliance is very important, because compliance is, if patients don't take the readings, the paramedics don't get that data, they can't do anything with it. So we measured compliance, and compliance fell off over the 6 months. And we originally thought that was because patients who had a lot of alerts were getting frustrated and didn't want to participate anymore. It was actually the people who didn't get any response were the people who stopped using the system. So we learned that while the paramedics are dealing with these patients with the alerts coming in, it was also important for the paramedics to have positive feedback for the patients who were doing well. And so we're actually working with some artificial intelligence to try to develop a system that will help with the paramedics to do that. Interesting fact was that the pre-ED visits and ED hospital admissions and 911 calls were high before the program. They dropped down during the program, and the program was set up so the patients were on for 6 months, and then they were taken off, which is a whole other discussion. So we're working with that. But as they got taken off, their habit returned to the pre-program enrollment. And so we've, through Queens, we've advocated that the patients, these kind of patients stay on the program until the paramedics think they should come off. So this is the numbers. We, on the right side in the blue are the Grey County numbers, and then on the left side are the numbers of the people in the program. There was so the retention rate was higher in Grey. I think that gives the paramedics here good credit for the work that they did, so it was 92% in Grey. There were 368,000 readings at the time of this. Actually, it's well over 500,000 readings now. That's important because it gives Queens enough data, like big data, give them enough data to extrapolate what would happen if this was rolled out across the province. There was 1 alert and 12 readings, so that goes back to those people who were on the program. We don't want people on the program whose nothing's happening. That doesn't make sense. But also you don't want to be bombarded with readings because that wears the paramedics out. So 1 alert and 12 readings seemed to be kind of the perfect match where the bright people were on the program, so that means that they were ill, but also they were able to learn through the program. That corresponded to 3,200 interactions between the paramedic and the patients, which is what Queens calls nudges, and nudges is actually a coaching session that allows the paramedic to coach the patient on how to live better. The 911 call reduction was 36% in Grey, 26% overall across the province. That is average. So if you take the most critical people that were on the program, it's about a 47% reduction in savings for 911. One of the things in Grey is early on they had about a 50% reduction in 911 calls, and then as the referrals came in, they got more and more patients that weren't really 911 patients but more ER patients, so that blended came out to 36%, but you'll see the savings in other areas. That equated to 92 hours of reallocated service for paramedics, and across the system that's very important because ER wait time, discharge time is very costly for the system. In fact, many paramedic services get all of their ambulances tied up at the discharge and they don't have anybody to respond. So it's cost avoidance because you're not saving actual dollars at that moment, but if you're not hitting your targets in response times, you're going to have to put more units on the road, and that costs about $1.5 million a year. One of the things, there was a 32% across the board reduction in hospital admissions, and the one thing that we didn't realize early on, but really makes sense when you sit back and think about it, is there was a 41% reduction in 30-day readmittances. And that's huge because that's where the system gets bogged down with these people coming and going. And the Ministry of Health is, there's all kind in the States, they actually reward hospitals for not having readmissions. But when you think about it, the patients who would go back to the hospital because they don't know what's going on, talk to the paramedic and the paramedic's watching them, so they're not going back. That's a big saving. That turned out that the estimated savings by Queens was about $7,200 per patient on the program. The cost to implement the program was about $1,100 per patient. That includes technology and paramedic time. And that it equated to a 542% return on investment in the program. So that, I think overall, we were really impressed with the results of this. That's expanding across the province. Where it has to go now is the funding for this program is going to be finished from our side in April of March 31st, 2019. But it's over to the counties and the paramedic services to work with the LHINs to keep a program like this running, because I think there's no question the return on investment is just impressive. So I'll answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Rick. That's a great presentation. I'm glad we're part of the future, so
Yeah, that's right.
hopefully the new government understands and continues to fund this kind of thing. Any questions from Councillor Bell?
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. Rick, great presentation. Obviously, there's a lot of positives in this. I guess, do you see this rolling out across the province in the next 5 years as far as what's been done in Grey County, or do you see some hiccups along the way whereby I'm going to say, can counties help try to get that message across not only to the LHINs but to the province And congratulations to you and Kevin for getting this in place.
Yes, so there were hiccups. I think there still are hiccups. So I'll be perfectly blunt. You guys were visionaries. Other councils are not visionaries, so don't print that. I don't want any bad press. But anyway, there was a lot of councils early on didn't want to start a program that, a pilot program that would create expectations and then couldn't be sustained. And so kudos to you for being a trailblazer, but that is a hurdle, and it's being overcome. So now we're at 20. Almost half the counties in the province are coming on. So, there's the early adopters, and now we're kind of into the middle. I think over time, you'll see it being at a LIN level. They now have funding for the community paramedics. And to me, it's a no-brainer, but, that's the LIN. You have to, so as county, you should lobby for this if you think this is valuable at the LIN level. And also, from a quality of life point of view, we really didn't touch on that, but Kevin can attest to it, but we get letters all the time thanking the system for allowing the patients to stay at home rather than be in the hospital for the last days of their life. So I would say, yeah, it should. It's up to councils to do that.
Well, thank you. Yes, John?
Just continuing on that aspect, Mr. Warden, is this something that needs to, I'm sure the province might see it, but this would be really good to see in one of those presentations at either an AMO
Well, I think
conference.
that's on our list, John.
Very good as far
yeah.
as moving that forward, but this needs to be shared at a higher level, shall we say.
I think we certainly will do that because it's rewarding to see the success, and it's reshaping how people can live at home and be looked after as well. Thanks. Any other questions? Oh, seeing none. Well,
Thank you.
continued success, and you have our ear. Thank you, and our support. And thanks for staff for bringing us into the future. So, we have a consent agenda, and we've got several options here, A, B, C, and is there anyone that wants to have anything taken from that? Yes, Councilor McQueen, sorry. Mr. A, okay. A, okay. And any other? Okay, so we'll deal with the approval of the other one, so that put this on the floor, that the following consent entities be received and that staff be authorized to take actions necessary to give effect to the recommendations in the staff reports, and that the correspondence be supported or received for information as recommended in the consent agenda for items B and C. Councillor Hicks and Councillor Patterson put it on the floor. All in favor of B and C going forward?
Any discussion?
Any discussion? I thought we were, okay, yes, go ahead.
So just want to comment on item B,
Okay,
and I don't want to make any assumption about staff communications. Is there any need to be concerned about our local municipality understanding the implications of what's taking place in our township? And I ask because, we've had some discussions recently where perhaps the communication wasn't what it should have been. So I just put that to staff. Is this something that our staff is fully aware of? And
so what you're
Further
saying is
comment.
there synergy between the upper tier and lower tier on
Exactly.
buying salt
Well,
and sand?
I don't know what I don't know. There was a discussion about some recent tendering that,
Okay. You want to comment on that, Pat? This is really,
Yeah.
we really should have had this withdrawn, but anyhow, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I believe this is basically a question about purchasing procedure as much as anything else. An issue with, where we're going to tender with the member municipalities, and we're all kind of committed to go in that tender together. Because a contractor or provider makes an assumption on a certain quantity of an item, you really can't just pull out and decide to buy it from somebody else. So that was kind of, whether or not everyone's totally aware of that, I think they are, but.
So you say there's a good relationship between upper and lower
Yeah, I mean,
tier
our purchasing
communications?
department, very open to questions. They understand the process. I think most municipalities understand it as well. So I know there was an issue on this one with some local angles, but I don't know. I think it was kind of cleared up, but.
I expect it was, and I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything that I and my colleague here should be more aware of. We trust that you're doing what you need to do, and communications are what they should be. So thank you for that.
Thanks for that, and thanks for that little discussion. Any other discussion on B and C? Okay, call the vote, all in favor? Motion's carried. So we'll deal with A now or later?
Later, at the end.
You're going to deal with that later. Okay, so,
Oh, you're getting a ton.
You got one, couple of those left.
46, that's a little early, but okay. You want a break? Is that what we're getting? I'm not getting a break. So you break if you need to, but we'll continue on then until a little later. Okay, so if I may, I'll go on to items for direction and discussion, which is number 7. And we're going to bring forward and put on the floor the report CAORCW 0918 regarding the Grey Roots Museum and Archives Collecting Plan 2018-2023 be received and approved. Who's going to discussion bring? Pardon? Oh, hi. Come on up. Councillor Bell, you're moving it. Who's seconding it? Councillor Mackey. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I'm here to do a short presentation on the background of the collecting plan and why we've done it. So basically, it's a living document that's going to guide the collecting of the permanent artifact collection for Grey Roots for about the next 5 years. It also recognizes that we have other collections at Grey Roots, such as the Living History Collection, which is things like the steam traction unit, which can be demonstrated for special events, our education collection, which are objects that are used as part of school programs and teaching, and our research collection, which is a collection of reference books that assist us in telling the stories of the artifacts that we hold in trust for the County of Grey. So this is a long-term project. When I came on, if we could go to the next slide. Oh, I do that, don't I? So in order to just put it into layman's terms, in plain language, a good collections management plan and what Grey Roots Museum and about 600 other Ontario museums are graded upon by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Recreation is that we need to know what we have, we need to know what we need to know where it is, and we need to take good care of it because we are taking care of it for the citizens and the visitors to Grey County. And we have to make sure that someone gets something good out of it, especially people around us and our neighbors. So back in 2004, Grey Roots opened and moved everything from the old museum location to the new location. And for about 4 years, my predecessor, Stacey McLennan, was busy unpacking. And I came on in 2008, and I continued unpacking. And at that point, I did an inventory of everything that we had, and we started taking photographs of everything that we had, which we need to do as part of our collection standards. And we started condition reporting everything that we had. Now, this was not me alone. This was also the registrar. This was college interns. This was volunteers and lots of summer students. So the project to inventory the collection began in 2008 and took 5 years, and it took about 7 years to digitize all of the artifacts. It took 2 years to edit the catalog records so that they can go online, and our entire collection is now available online, so it's accessible to anyone around the world that has a computer or a personal device. And it took another 2 years to rate the artifacts. Now, this is a rating system that was first used in the Netherlands, and when they were trying to see what the value of their collection was in a cultural historical way, they went from an A, B, C, and D model, which we've adopted. And then maybe some of the new councillors don't know, but back in 2001, there was a storage fire, which unfortunately, there were a lot of artifacts there. So we had catalog records for artifacts that we didn't actually have. So we went through three separate deaccessioning processes to take those catalog records out of our permanent artifact collection database. And our collecting plan meshes with our vision and mission statement and the strategic plan that's just recently been done, as well as the county's brand statement. So, of course, we want to make Grey Roots interesting, relevant, and we want to make the collection representative of who we are. Because if we're just collecting the same things that every other museum is collecting, then why would anyone come to visit the museum? We need to tell the stories of Grey County. We need to tell the stories of the people who settled here, who were first here, who settled here, and who we are and what we're doing today and where we're going in the future. So on our website, for about 6 months, we had a pop-up survey that was very short, and we asked people that were on our website and residents of the county and visitors to the county, what did they want to see in our collection? And rating the highest was the human history of the region, the pioneer settlement history, and First Nations history, and then followed by art and culture and agriculture. So, going back to about 2000, this is the number of objects that we add to the permanent artifact collection per year. Now you can see there's a big spike in 2008. That was a large tool collection which was accepted in 2007. But we average about 200 to 300 artifacts per year, and I accept about 1/3 of what we're actually offered. So we have to make sure that there's a real tie to Grey County and that what we do accept tells a story. About 95% of what we put into our permanent artifact collection is from donations, both from Grey County residents as well as people who are descendants of people that lived in Grey County. So I've gotten things from out west. One lady sent me something from Australia. So the ability to have our collection online is that people can see that we are there, we have a presence, and they can connect to us that way, which is really great. I should just go back and just say that about 1% is purchased, and 3% historically has been found in that collection. I expect that number to go down since our inventory is finished, and 1% comes from other sources, such as bequests. Now, our collection, our artifacts come from primarily the Owen Sound area, and this is most likely because of our geographical location as well as the historical location of the first museum, the Owen Sound / Grey County Museum. Much easier for Owen Sound residents to deliver things to us, followed by Ontario, and then by the municipality of Meaford. Now, one of the things that's come out of doing this collection plan is that we know now that the town of Blue Mountains and Hanover areas were underrepresented with regard to artifacts, and that's most likely because they have museums that are closer to them than actually their county museum is. So we'll be focusing on getting more artifacts from those areas so that we can make it more unified and more balanced. So what's in our artifact collection? Well, the largest portion is tools and equipment for materials, 27%. So that covers things like agricultural tools, carpentry, that sort of thing, construction tools and equipment, followed by personal objects. And then I did the cultural historical value rating on our collection. So as you can see, 80% of our collection is artifacts that fall within our collecting scope, but don't present a great cultural historical value. Now that's not to say they're not important, it's to say that these are the types of things that we can put into Morriston Heritage Village because they are easily replaceable, or we have multiples of them, or they don't have a great county provenance, but out in the village, they have extreme importance to telling the story of an early 20th century village within Grey County. So to have them is great. B are artifacts that are not of paramount importance in cultural historical value, but do have great attraction or exhibit value. And A's are the top of the Grey County cultural heritage that are irreplaceable and indispensable to us. And at this point, we're going to take a look at some of those artifacts. So I brought some along, and I'm going to hand out some little white gloves. Explain better the difference of the importance of the artifacts and the artifact rating system. So what I'm passing around now, going this way, is a powder flask. It's a C-rated artifact. It was most likely made in Europe, but and we don't know who made it. The patent is not quite readable, but it may date from as early as the 1850s. It came with a family of the McElkerns, who spent some time in the United States before they moved to Grey County. And it was donated by Mrs. Jessie McKay, and they farmed in Sydenham Township, Grey County. What's going around the other side is a World War I linen message kite. So it belonged to George Webster Butchart as a souvenir of the Great War, World War I. He likely obtained it in Europe, but we don't know where. And so this has a lead weight in it, and it would be thrown or dropped out of one's airplane to the troops below to communicate something to them. So it was used by the Royal Air Force during the World War I, and Butchart was a member of the 147th Grey Overseas Battalion, which was raised here in 1915. He was a lieutenant, and he survived. And when the 147th was broken up, when it went overseas, Butchart transferred to the Royal Air Force. And he was also the one who assisted Robert McDowell with his aircraft invention, which was built in Owen Sound and is now in the Canadian Aircraft Museum. It's the oldest aircraft in Canada. Unfortunately, the aircraft didn't actually fly. It just managed a couple of hops in a farmer's field in Sydenham Township. So that tells a great story. And so this is a B-rated artifact, whereas the other one that's going around is a C-rated artifact. I'm going to make this one quick. What I'm passing around now, these are A-rated artifacts, so these are our absolutely indispensable, we cannot replace them type artifacts. So the first, what's going around here is Nani Babaque's garters, personalized, hand-sewn. Now, women use garters both to hold up their sleeves while doing dishes, but also to hold up their stockings. And she has created an open work text of her name, Nani Babaque, That's what she's called in historical texts, and that's what she referred to herself as. Nowadays, we refer to her as Nani Baba Kwa. And she's also got Owen Sound, Upper Canada. And we know that she did that between 1845 and 1865 because she moved up to this era after 1845, and she passed away in 65. And she was an amazing needle worker. And she was the one that was elected General Council of Chiefs, held at Rama in July 1859, to be an envoy for her people to go see Queen Victoria, to address the injustices faced by the Aboriginal people in Canada West. And her audience with the Queen took place in 1860 at Buckingham Palace. The stone item that's going around here is a banner stone, and banner stones started being produced around 14,000 BC. But this one probably dates between 3,200 and 1,000 BC. It was likely a counterweight on a spear, which would be thrown by a spear thrower. It's called a banner stone. It's a double-notched butterfly-type banner stone, and it was collected by Frederick Birch, who is an amateur archaeologist living in Wodehouse, Euphrasia Township, Grey County. And they were very, very important for both for trade and for hunting, for survival, and for making allegiances between different tribes of the early people here. The spear was eventually replaced by the bow and arrow at about 500 AD. So new technologies took over, and the banner stones went out of style. So that's obviously an A-related artifact. And those A's and B's do not go out into the village. We keep them under lock and key and are very, very picky about how long they're exhibited and who handles them, who has access, that sort of thing. Yes?
What is this made of?
It's most likely slate. It's polished stone. So it would have been extremely labor intensive to produce something like that.
But I'm thinking, how do you,
Yeah. Now, the other collections that exist at Grey Roots, as I mentioned, are the education collection, which we use for hands-on teaching, and these are C-rated artifacts, and they're not part of the permanent artifact collection. The Living History collection, which is our collection of vintage cars, steam traction engines, model trains, agricultural and construction equipment, whose the specialness in those is that they move and they operate and people can see them running. And then our reference collection, which helps us research, date, and gives credence to the stories behind the artifacts. Oops. There we go. So now we're working toward the ideal collections. In an ideal world, what should our collections look like? Well, they should be relevant, representative, and unified. And now we're working on implementation strategy. How are we going to do that? And so we are working toward that, and I'll have that done within the next year and a half. And then we'll be obviously evaluating how well our plan is going. We want to see the B's and C's go way up, and our B's and A's go way up, and our C's to remain static. And then we'll be reviewing the plan at regular intervals to keep it a living document. And does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, thank you very much. If we could just have the gloves and the artifacts make their way back.
Yes, Bob, Councillor Pringle has a question.
Just, I'm curious, but if anyone has something that they think is of interest, what's the procedure? They contact you?
They contact me, yes. Yeah,
That's still the same procedure as it has been in the past?
that's right.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Ward? Yes, Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Sim. Very interesting. And just what we need for a 100-degree weekend coming up.
Don't use them during that.
You have numerous, countless wonderful items at Grey Roots. I just want to say, first of all, that our theater company on a couple of times has actually rented some clothing from you folks and brought them back. But they have worked in so well with what we were trying to portray and perform, and it's just You have a wealth of items there. Your storage space, it must be getting filled up. Do you still have capacity, or is this going to be a problem in the future, near future?
Good question, good question. Back in 2000 and, I believe it was 2012, we had a space assessment done by the Canadian Conservation Institute, and at that point, what we call Museum Storage 1 was about 80% full, and Museum Storage 2 was about 60% full. Since then, last year, I wrote a successful Museums Assistance Program Collections Management Grant. We got $50,000 from Cultural Spaces, which the county matched, and dollar for dollar. So we put in 8 new high-density rolling units, which got all of our furniture collection out of Museum Storage 1, so it's now visible, accessible to the public to look at. And it's probably increased our storage space by about, I'm going to say, a sixth. So I would say Museum Storage 1 now is now probably about 60% full instead of 80. So I think that has really helped us, as well as every building that we build in Morriston, we move artifacts out. So if the general store goes through in the next little while, then a great number of commercial artifacts that we've been collecting for that building for a number of years will be on display. So that gives us more space in the main museum storage building.
Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Stuart. Well, I just wanted to attest to the fact that SIM is certainly out there trying to gather local Grey County artifacts. I was at an auction sale last summer, and I was interested in a crock that had Walters Falls floor on it. And then I realized I was bidding against the county.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor McQueen, and then.
Thank you very much for
And
your
McKean,
presentation.
McQueen and McKean.
It's,
Go ahead.
It's McQueen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming today. And my question is around, we do have either private or municipal-run museums throughout the county. So if a artifact that comes and it's either duplication or it's not fitting into the Grey Roots mandate or whatever, is it offered to those lower, or do you have a list of all those? So if something came from Grey Highlands, I mean, we have the Southeast Grey Museum, we also have a private one that's called the Osprey Museum. Do you have a list of all those that you can, I mean, it's just a shame that people go to the trouble of donating stuff, and sometimes they can't take it back because in the state or whatever, they have to move on, or they have to dispose of it, right? Is that being offered up?
Yes, yeah, we do that. If somebody comes in and wants to donate something, and I say we already have one of those, or that doesn't quite meet our collecting mandate, I'll direct them to, the Marine and Rail Museum or the Meaford Museum, or, yeah, that definitely happens.
As long as you got a list of those municipal, and there are some private ones out there too, and it's all about serving the public and be able to keep those artifacts visible for the
Yeah.
public. Other question, or other comment I guess I make, I know a few years back around the table, maybe it was at a committee level, I know they were reviewing all your stuff, and I just remember there seemed to be a lot of guns and bullets and all that stuff, so I guess you sort of sifted through that and disposed of or moved all those on, so I guess every so often you have to take the time to review what you have and that sort of thing, so.
That's right, yep.
Thank you.
Councillor McKean.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just a question is, how much communication goes between Grey Roots and the other museums, both private and municipally owned in Grey County? The reason why I ask is that I know that our Craigleith Heritage Depot has got a lot of limited storage, and I know that just very recently there's been a lot of artifacts come in from the Osler, to do with the Osler Castle, Castle Glen, and they're supposed to be putting them together for a display. Do those displays between Grey Roots and museums like that, can they be switched back and forth? Because usually a museum puts a display up for maybe 4 months and then they switch them out to something else. And is that something that is done at Grey Roots and with other museums too?
That is a good question. Usually we plan our museum exhibits 1 to 2 years in advance. But if we know of a quality exhibit that needs or should be shown at another location, then yes, we're always open to that. And that would be the interpretation department. And I mean, we do rent other small exhibits from other county museums for sure. Yeah.
So you're establishing is there a synergy? And I guess it does exist and can always be improved though, so.
Yeah, we have a Grey Bruce Duffer network meeting. We meet twice a year in the spring and the fall. And so we discuss items like that.
Well, thanks. Councillor Fosbrook, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you very much for the presentation and the show and tell. Nothing like touching something. So in the report, well, the resolution is be received and approved. I'm not sure if it's just my technical glitches. I wasn't able to open the link for the actual plan. In the financial and resource implications, it states Grey Roots currently has an artifact acquisition reserve of $25,000 for items of high cultural historical significance that may only be acquired for the PAC, Permanent Artifact collection via purchase. So what in fact are we approving from an expense standpoint? And $25,000 seems a little light for what you're doing.
That figure comes from the insurance settlement from the fire back in 2001. So that money's been sitting there since then. I do have an acquisitions budget, a small acquisitions budget of about $2,500 per year, which I almost always spend. The question again?
How much are we approving really with this plan? Is this something over and above, annual budget?
No.
Okay,
This annual budget is
Very good.
already in place.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. No further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim. Continued success. Councillor is taking his gloves off, and thank you, Councillor Greenfield. All right, so the motion is on the floor by Councillor Bell and Councillor Mackey. Any further discussion? Not having any further discussion, call the vote on this particular item. All in favor? Thank you. Didn't see any negative. All right, so the next one that we'll be moving forward on is the purchase of a community paramedic response vehicle. We'll put this on the floor. That report PSR CW 0618 for the purchase of a community paramedic response vehicle be received, and that staff proceed with purchasing of a vehicle as detailed in this report, and that the acquisition of this vehicle, estimated at $60,000, be funded from the paramedic services reserve, and the reserve be repaid annually from community paramedic base program funding provided by the Southwest Local Health Integration Network, and that Emergency Response Unit 1314 be disposed of as per Section 10.02 of the Grey County's purchasing procedure. Put that on the floor. Councillor Greenfield, secondly by Councillor Ardell. And Kevin, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, the purpose of this report is to request permission to purchase a vehicle for a community paramedic program. It's a bit about the background about the program. We started in 2015, and we were part of a trial across the province. There was roughly 30 sites that got approved to begin a trial, and it was to see if community paramedic home visits could improve the health of citizens as well, decrease healthcare costs for people living with chronic diseases. As you can see this morning, their initial reports, it's very positive. Again, there's other evidence from across the province where community paramedics have offered benefits to the patients. The funding was initially provided by Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care Community and Home Care Branch directly, and we received funding enhancements twice beyond the initial funding. So it got us through till February of 2017, but we had to suspend the program at that point because there wasn't enough funding to carry on with the 7-day-a-week program. In May of 2017, the Southwest LHIN, through the province, actually started providing funding for the community paramedic program again, and we wanted to get the program up and running. So what we did is we modified the number of days from 7 down to 5 to get us within our budget. At that point, they were providing $254,600. And we run the program Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the whole idea of this is we're not more than one day without a community paramedic out there. And we cover on the weekends when typically they can't get access to care if they need it. So we began operations in August of 2017, and we've been able to carry on with our regular programs, which is a big part of it, which is our home visit program, where we're affiliated with the Owen Sound Family Health Team. We are still doing remote patient monitoring, which allows us to spread to other areas of the county. We are still doing our community clinics at 14th Street as well, is in Thornbury. And we still do paramedic referral, where all patients over 65 are screened for being at risk in their home. In February of this past year, we ended up receiving an additional $8,000, which worked well because our budget was $261,527, and that put us at $262,600. So we were pretty much within budget with that extra allocation of funding. Part of that actually was built into that, which was never built in before, was to provide funding for a vehicle. When we did the original ministry funding, it was an in-kind contribution. That we would use these vehicles that we've had in the fleet, and and then we would continue to use that vehicle versus actually having money in there to purchase the appropriate vehicle for that program. The total purchase price for the community paramedic vehicle, it's estimated to be around $60,000, and what we're recommending is be funded from the paramedic reserve, and that we would fund that over the next 7 years. We're pretty confident, roughly 20 to 30,000 kilometers a year, that we would be able to keep that vehicle maintained and have it last that long. The current vehicles are supervisor vehicles that are retained beyond their replacement cycle. The current vehicle we use is 1314. It's a 2009 Chev Silverado, and the kilometers are quite high in it now. And the last one was over 400,000 when we took it off the road. And I just got to put a plug in here for our maintenance staff, because you normally can't keep vehicles on the road that long. It just goes to show how well they maintain them. So I can't say enough about the continued service for the vehicles and also our ambulances and the work they do with them. So our current fleet is a 2009 Chev Silverado, and we have a 2013 GMC Sierra and a 2014 Silverado. And you can see they're 200 and 300,000 kilometers as well. And up until we had to retire the vehicle in October, we utilized 4 vehicles, one for community paramedic and the one for supervisory and min and modified work. What we'd like to do is actually return to having that number of vehicles, because we do feel the shortage right now, and there's different events and different meetings we have to get to. So that would allow us to move back to the 4 vehicles available, one for CP. And if you look at what the fleet would end up looking like this year, we would have the 2013 and 14 pickup trucks. We are to tender for another vehicle as part of our capital purchasing for another supervisor vehicle this year, and then also the community paramedic vehicle. The community paramedic vehicle, when we started the program up again, we were able to work them in as first response. So they have done numerous of these calls. If they're out driving around and a call comes in and they're closest, they will respond. And we are going to book them on in the Chatsworth base, so they'll be booking on at 7 and ending at 7, so they'll be out there for extra coverage. And they'll be staffed just like a normal response vehicle would in the province. So we have to maintain that level of certification. There's a certain minimum standard, so that's what we want to do as far as the conversion is concerned. If the funding from the LIN were to cease, we would have to end up, and there was no use for this vehicle, would have to end up being sold. We have met with the LIN even in the last month, and we're talking with them not only because we'd like to get back to 7 days coverage, that they would fund 7 days coverage and actually potentially double up what we have today, where we'd have 4 community paramedics and we'd be able to expand even further to other areas of the county. Those talks are ongoing, and again, we're going to keep working to try to secure more funding.
Good, thanks for that report, Kim. Questions for Kevin here on the community vehicle? Yes, Councillor Ardell.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Not on this community vehicle, but while Mr. McNabb is there, I would just like to, if you could relay a message on behalf of the mayor and myself to the EMS that were involved in the tragedy in the town of the Blue Mountains, that, and I hope that the EMS family give the support to those individuals that were at that tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, no further discussion. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Very good. So thanks for,
Kevin. Just want to congratulate you, again on the paramedicine program. And just wondering from a higher level, if the pot of funds, is stagnant, where would you see funds being diverted from in the healthcare system? Because, the numbers that we were provided with earlier certainly demonstrates that, able to keep money out of the ERs. I'm not sure about community care access, whether there's some overlay there, but, if we're trying to shift funds or advocate for the shifting of funds towards paramedicine, where would you think that should come from?
Just when we worked with the researchers at Queen's and we talk about where the system savings are, if you were to look at paramedic calls, the number of paramedic calls and the cost per call, I don't know if you could actually take it down enough, but when you start getting into admittances and how much it costs for admittance, somewhere between $7,000 to $8,000 in admittance to the hospital and emergency room visits, that's where they really start to see the savings. I guess it's just tough to find that money because everybody has budgets, and I guess it's kind of bending the curve as opposed to stopping it. So like the Lynn seems supportive. Like when we go talk to them about our program, and the Queen's results that we've seen this morning definitely benefits. That's part of the evaluation. So I'm hopeful that they will see the benefit in this. It's not just Ontario, even across Canada and across Australia and England. It's kind of the way the model places are going.
Yeah. Well, it was great that the customer satisfaction, piece of it was, I think, better than some of the other programs that the Lynn may be funding right now.
Our qualitative, we do have some data from U of T on the EPIC program, and the qualitative is really high. We're just waiting on the quantitative. Like, it's very positive. And I know in the initial talks they said it was so high they were worried that they might think it was skewed because the satisfaction was so high.
very good. Yes, Madam CEO.
And just, Kevin, maybe you just want to speak to what we're seeing as the trend towards increasing call volumes, and where this is can potentially be a bit of an offset to help us deal.
Yeah, last year we were close to 10% increase in call volume, and we're at least 8% this year based upon where we were last year. So we're getting close to 20% in 2 years. It's very early because they just changed the act in December, and they're still working through the standards and the regs about how we do this treat and refer and treat and release. And that's one thing where I want to work on, because I believe that's probably where we're headed, is that this type of care that we're developing and also implementing here is that we are affiliated with the family health team. It almost has to get to that point where you almost like our emergency physician, where you patch into that physician and get orders for that care, is that we'd see this on all patients, and we'd have first response vehicles that would handle a certain subset of these patients that don't need to go to the hospital. So in one sense, we're helping people, but we're also proving a model of care that could be implemented on a bigger scale.
Thanks for that. Councillor Eccles, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Kevin, so remind me where the deficit was going to be covered in this year's budget had the province not come forward with this extra $8,500. Because we had budgeted the operations at 261, and the province was giving us 254, whatever it was. But with this extra funding, we're bounced up to 262, which now is going to cover it off. So obviously we were short a little bit of money prior. Where was that? Just to remind me of where that was going to be covered off.
It was my understanding that we are still waiting for the Lynn to complete a review of the service. And we had anticipated that might be in our hands already, but I think we know what's been happening there. So they were a little bit delayed, but certainly we had some pretty solid assurance from the Lynn that they were on board with us. What we have done in the past is adjusted the level of service to be able to align with the available budget. And if we have to, ratchet down the service in order to make the numbers work, we've done that in the past. So that's what was always available to us. We were just very hopeful that wouldn't come to that. I don't know, is there anything else, Kevin?
Probably covered most of it there, but there is a small amount in there. I'm not 100%, but it's like $5,000 roughly for QA and stuff like that as far as overseeing the program. So a lot of that stuff can be built in, that we build for that. But
So we've got two other vehicles here. 300,000 seems to be the point. I guess going forward on the budgeting, what for these vehicles, if we're continuing with this program and the LIN makes that decision that, or the province for that matter, and flowing the funding through the LIN, 4 vehicles, so we've got a replacement on a 7-year process. I guess what I'm pushing towards here is what are we going to need to build in? Because obviously this one, the way you've got it, is this $8,500 in borrowing, or is there a way of funding that going forward so that we're not having this borrowing to change these vehicles out? And maybe that's more of a question
I don't have the
towards,
answer right today, Kevin.
maybe that's a question more towards another Kevin.
I see Kevin, the other Kevin, popping up there, and so he might have some comments on that.
The way the Ministry of Health makes us purchase capital is that we are only allowed to build in the depreciation of a vehicle. So the county is responsible to upfront the purchase of the capital, and then the ministry over, as that vehicle is depreciated down or building, things like that, that's how we get our money back. But no, it's been an issue about, we do upfront capital when it comes to vehicles with the Ministry of Health.
Thanks for that, Kevin.
So I guess if I could further, obviously then it's another download and we're still on the strings here. It may, but we've upfronted it, and at any point in time, if the funding is cut, we're on the hook for these vehicles. I mean, we've already purchased them, so.
Well, as Kevin did say, if the funding was eliminated, we would have to consider selling the vehicle or funding it ourselves, but that hasn't happened yet, so it's always there. So I don't know what you want other than making a comment on that subject, and I think we've covered it.
Well, I guess what it is going forward, in the budget in 2018, we were replacing one vehicle. It's come forward now, obviously we're replacing the second vehicle. We did have an idea that we were going to go with 3. We got some extra funding. Whether that vehicle should be the Silverado, the 2009, in the budget this year, we were going to live with that. We got a little extra funding, so now we're going to purchase and going forward and getting rid of this one. Just to be cautious, obviously the Ministry of Health is saying, you've got to upfront. It's one of those budgeting things that we better be very cognizant of. I think we've seen something, apparently it doesn't happen, but the boiling of the water, I think we saw in a breakfast meeting the other day, the frog. It's an analogy, don't get caught in this, of how far we're going to go in. Just because we got a little bit of money, let's jump on this. I fully support the program, but.
Well, I think one of the things why we're approaching the Ministry of Health is that there are substantial savings on this paramedicine concept that probably aren't being recognized in the hospital costing system. So we need to reemphasize how we're actually saving money for the province. So I think the jury's out on that, but we thank you for your comments on that and duly noted. Okay, any other discussions? All right, we'll call the vote on this. All in favor? Motion is carried. An opportunity for a 4-minute break. Anybody, or comfort break? 4 minutes. Thank you. I'm not sure whether we did the 4-minute break or not, but we're close to it. So we are going to go to C, which is the report CAORCW 1218, Saints and Sinners Transition be received, and that staff be directed to transfer the Saints and Sinners Reserve Funds of $8,898.12 from Grey County Economic Development to Simcoe County Tourism for continued operations of the Saints and Sinners Bootleggers Run Trail. On the floor, motion, Councillor Barfoot and Councillor Aki, we got that on the floor. Discussions, and Counselor, oh,
Kevin's off volunteer.
hey, Kevin, thanks. Thanks for coming up and explaining this.
Well, so Savannah was on holidays and she asked me if I could speak to this because it's
Okay,
really
good.
a financial thing that's happening here. The county's, with producers and other partners, established this about 4 years ago and started running this Saints and Sinners Bootleggers Run Trail. And at that time, the county was putting in about $2,000 a year for this promotion, and it has now, and so with doing that, the county was not only the economic development lead on it, but also all the financials were handled by the county here
Right.
through our, so with the collection of money from our partners and stuff flowed through our books, and then the expenses were paid through the county of Grey. The staff here have believed that now this is in place, that the level of commitment is no longer required, like meaning the County of Grey's funding commitment to that in the 2018 budget did not show any commitment from that, because I believe this has got to a state with the leadership and developed that it's sustaining itself, and that with the other partners, they can continue on here. So what this is asking now is that not only are we stepping aside from the lead as the direction with the committee itself, we are also looking then to divest this over to Simcoe County now to be the lead on that side, and it would run through their financials now, so they would maintain the revenues coming in and expenses being paid out and follow their policies of procurement, et cetera. So it was not included in our budget to transfer this funds to reserve, or from our reserve to Simcoe, so this is why this report is coming forth here now to get approval from the County of Grey to move those surplus funds over to Simcoe County for this to continue on under their direction and their lead.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions for Kevin on this particular transfer of funds? Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Kevin. So the funds that we're transferring, is that basically the remaining funds in that account, and we just won't need that anymore?
That's right. These were like funds that we collected from when we asked partners to participate and give funds, and the counties of Simcoe and Grey were putting in funds. Depending on the year, if we had really good years with revenues generated, the created surplus we transferred to reserve, and now so it's not just the county's money that's sitting in that reserve, it's all the partners' money sitting there.
Thank you. You had me at yes.
Okay, sorry.
So Simcoe's on board, and they're going to take over the lead when?
That's right. They're asking for the money.
Once we pass this,
They're asking for the money, and I said I needed council approval before I could.
Okay, so they're taking charge now? Okay, good. Any other questions? Okay, call the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. We take a 30-second pause because I think you're back up here for a 10-year capital forecast. So, the next one is report FR-CW 1718 regarding 2019-2028 10-year capital forecast be received, and that the first year of the 2019-2028 10-year capital forecast identified in report FR-CW 1718 be included in the county's 2019 budget for consideration by county council, and that it be used for planning purposes for the 2019 budget, and that as per the county's purchasing procedures, staff be authorized to procure up to 50% of the gross expenditures contained in the first year of the current 10-year capital forecast prior to the annual budget being approved once council has authorized these expenditures being procured via resolution. Put that on the floor. Councillor Wright, seconder Councillor Bell. Okay, Kevin, you're going to lead us through this.
That's correct. And I will call upon my colleagues here to help speak to items that they've included in this capital forecast. So this report is Grey County's first 10-year capital forecast. It represents our anticipated expenditures over a 10-year horizon. This is a planning tool that forecasts the county's capital requirements over a longer time horizon. We had always previously just done a 5-year capital plan. On your desks are hard copies of each of the report's attachments, and so there includes a corporate summary, and then there's function summaries, and behind each function summary is the actual departments that are part of that function. So like under corporate services, you'd find human resources, information technology, property admin building, et cetera. So the consolidated package represents the corporate capital funding needs for 2019 in the amount of $15,293,568, which is $816,000 or a 1.47% increase higher than the net capital funding that was in the 2018 approved budget. With council's approval, the first year of the capital forecast will be used in setting the 2019 annual budget. This is a living document, and like I said, it's a planning tool. So any changes to capital spending made during a budget process will be incorporated into updated forecasts, as well as necessary revisions due to resource availability, inflationary adjustments, need studies, building condition assessments, and available funding levels. The county's asset management plan, titled from 2016, that was presented in early 17, recommended a 15-year option of increasing tax revenues 1% each year for the next 15 years, solely for the purpose of phasing in full funding for the asset classes that were included in that plan. This has been incorporated into this 10-year capital program, and the most significant part of that is about 92% of that 1% increase is showing up under transportation services under the construction and resurfacing portfolio. So staff has used assumptions in order to develop these 10-year capital forecasts. These assumptions have risks. Like, for example, federal gas tax, it's based on the countywide or the countrywide census. So we've already been indicated that our population isn't, and that census isn't growing as quickly as other parts of the country. So we're anticipating actually a reduction in our federal gas tax. OSIF funding, the Ontario Community Infrastructure funding, again, we get about a 3-year time horizon of what we expect for funding. After that, we're ballparking it. So all those are risks that could change and impact this forecast, but it's a starting point here for trying to see where we're going here on a longer term. The 10-year capital forecast for 2019 to 28 can also be found. It's on our website, and in that package, you can drill right down into there's what we call capital project sheets that each of the departments fill out. It's really a working document for them, giving them, what the links are, how they came about, or the reason they included this into the program. So those are there if anyone wishes to look at them. What I'm going to do now, like I said, each of these packages here have been put together, and they're showing their net levy amounts as the bottom line, amount to come from taxation. In the actual summary sheets by the departments, you'll see to and from reserves and stuff coming and going, partnership funding and stuff like that that's in there as well, coming down to that, what I said, net taxation. What I'd like to recommend we do is, if we were to go through each of the projects for 10 years, we probably should plan a 2-day workshop on this, I guess. But this is just a plan, and you're not approving anything here. I want to make that clear. It's just a planning document. It's not a budget document. We're not permitted to have budget documents approved that are longer than 5 years, and even that has some prequels in, depending on election year and timing of those 5 years. So I've been careful here to call this a forecast. It's not a budget that's being passed here or approved. So it's just a planning document. The qualifier I have made in the motion is that if for some reason staff need to proceed prior to the annual budget being approved, that it's something they're showing in here in this budget that needs to come forward, they would come back to the committee of the whole and then ask for permission to proceed with a purchase. This sometimes happens with trucks, tandem trucks, where we're trying to get them for a winter season, and especially in an election year, where budgets aren't passed as soon as other years, then that staff, in order to get that actually in that truck and on the road for the following winter season, would need to get it ordered. So they would come here and ask for that approval. So you're not approving any spending here, it's just permitting staff to start working on these plans and looking at designs, et cetera, and stuff, so where they're headed with this, and it's trying to give you as a longer range, what are we looking at increases here based on what we have for our assets and our capital. So if council will be fine, I'd like to just talk about some of the notable items, and I would call upon my colleagues to speak to them. So the first thing I would like to do is start with corporate services, and the first item there that's kind of new is under human resources, so I'll let Grant McClevey speak to that one. Okay.
Welcome, Grant.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kevin and Mr. Warden, County Council. There's a new piece in here, and we just kind of realized it when we were putting the capital budget together. We have a corporate scheduling software. We call it SSC, and it's used in the Homes for the Aged and throughout the county. Right now, we can see that it's useful, but it's not doing the job that we actually need it to do. And so we started to put money aside so that we can get a better piece of software for scheduling. It has done a good job, and again, we're not looking to make any purchases on this for quite some time, but we thought we would get it in the capital budget so that we would have the money there. The other two pieces that you'll see in the HR capital budget are the human resources software update. They're moving to the cloud. It's going to be a web-based program, and we need to make the switch over there, and that's going to be happening in 2019. And the other piece that you'll see in there is for the market salary review for non-union. We need to do this about every 5 years to make sure that our salaries are competitive with the comparators that we have in the county. And so those are the three things there. Again, the new one is the $40,000 per year, and that is going to be added up to finally make a replacement for a new software for our scheduling and payroll.
Thank you. Any questions of Kevin or Grant? Okay, thanks, Grant.
The next item is under corporate services is information technology, and Jody will speak to those.
Thanks, Jody.
Just a couple of projects that we wanted to draw attention to. Sort of in line with the last few reports that IT has brought to council, we have indicated where we want to start managing the life cycle on our major hardware, our network hardware. So that's all included in a single project. That includes everything from, again, our core server infrastructure, our network access points, switches, and routers. It's lumped in together, although we have done it on sort of a 5-year refresh cycle for almost everything. We are thinking that there may be times where either the technology changes or security landscape changes faster than that. So we'll keep you informed if ever we feel the need to change that. We put aside $30,000 starting next year for virtual desktop infrastructure. What that is basically, rather than logging into a computer and having everything you need as a user right there on the computer, that sort of desktop would sit on a server somewheres, and your computer would just connect to it. That potentially could save a lot of money in how much we invest in the hardware for each user, and it would certainly make it a lot easier to maintain. So next year we'll be doing a full cost-benefit analysis for that, and hopefully moving forward with it. The last one we wanted to draw attention to is $20,000 for network cabinets. So what we are aiming to do next year is improve security and even maintenance of our equipment, just by taking everything that's stored at a remote site and making sure that it's in a locked compartment in those locations.
Thanks, Jody. Questions of Jody? Okay, thanks. Kevin?
Next, I'll ask Emery Shaw to speak to the property administration building.
Hi.
Good morning.
So from some of our new items that we did add to capital, our meeting room tables and chairs, we did put some money over the next few years. We were able to stay within our budget for all of the other furniture that we had, but due to expanding this building and looking at some of the existing tables and chairs that we have probably don't work in some of our meeting rooms, like a very large table in one room doesn't necessarily work anymore. So we did put some funds in for that over the next 3 years. Our existing generator replacement, so the TSSA changes have come down for a generator that is within a building. So there were some modifications that were going to happen to the building. There were also the generator is aging. When we were building, we did look at the possibility of getting one generator that would do the entire building, but it was actually going to be more expensive than having 2 separate ones. So we decided to wait until the building was complete in order to add on the extra generator or the additional or replacement generator. We're looking at an auto floor scrubber. Now that we have a lot of tiles and a lot of floor that needs to be cleaning, this will certainly provide some hours of relief for our custodians. And we're also looking in the future at some HVAC equipment replacement. This was according to our BCAs that we do have some HVACs that are going to be nearing their end in the existing building. And we also are looking at the carrier control system. It is an existing system that we had. It's not the new one, but it does require a software update. And once that happens, that will also allow us to better understand what is needed for the HVAC. And we may not to need as many systems as we're thinking in the budget, but that's not starting until 2021-22, so that gives us some time to prepare.
Thank you. Questions of Anne Marie? Okay. Kev?
We're now moving into the planning community development section. And first thing that's notable in there is under economic development. And the first one is the skills training, trades and innovation initiative, and that's the Sydenham campus. And that is dealing with trying to create that business hub there. And that what we've done is taken the building assessment that we had done as part of the work on acquiring that building and used that in there and that's taking into account the revenues that we have placed for renting that site and living within the rent unit it's going to break even on that. So that's the first thing there. The other item that's under economic development is transitioning the municipal partnership fund into a community improvement plan. And I'm going to let, Randy's worked with Savannah on this, so I'm going to let Randy speak to this, okay?
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, Council. So this is a continuation of the discussion that we've had previously about looking at developing a community improvement plan program in partnership with local municipalities. So this is something that economic development and planning are currently working on. In consultation with the Economic Development Working Group, municipal and county staff, we identified the need for a community improvement plan program. And this will help to promote and enable development across the county as outlined in the county official plan. Projects are identified and operationalized at the local level where funds can be used to support business development based on program that staff are currently working on. This could include possible incentives for the creation of affordable housing, towards facade improvement programs that may exist at local municipalities, supporting the development of business plans, etc. So as I mentioned, we're currently working on that and we'll be presenting more information about what that program could entail going forward. We wanted to, at this point, at least put a placeholder in terms of what we're thinking in terms of potential funding for this program. And what we're recommending is to suspend the Municipal Partnership Fund, and this is that fund that was set up last year, providing $5,000 to each municipality towards various projects. So what we're recommending is we take that funding and incorporate it as part of this Community Improvement Plan program. The dollars budgeted in the capital projects have been incorporated, and what we're recommending is, at this stage, is an estimated lifespan of 5 years. And we're recommending $20,000 per municipality per year over the next 5 years to support the CIP program. This is, basically it totals out to $180,000 over the next 5 years. And to phase in this increase, we are recommending in 2019 that $80,000 be funded from one-time funding reserve, the $22,500 from funds set aside previously in the Missile Partnership Fund would go towards this, and that $77,500 from taxation to help ease and transition into this increase. These would be actual dollars, so the $20,000 per municipality per year would be actual dollars. There are other incentives that we're looking at offering that would be above the $20,000. These things could include application fee rebates, development charge refunds, land, property as well. So that's over and above the $20,000 that's being identified in this capital program. And that's what we've come up with at this stage. And like I said, we'll have more details about what we're recommending as part of the Community Improvement Plan program based on discussions that we've already had with Economic Development Working Group and others.
Thanks, Randy. Questions? Okay, thank you.
I guess while I'm here, I'll just go through some of the planning updates. So the one new one that we're recommending is Age-Friendly Community Strategy Action Plan. Given the aging demographic in Gray, as well as the out-migration of youth in our communities, we are recommending that in 2019 we develop an age-friendly community strategy action plan. This strategy and action plan will build on the work done as part of Recolor Gray, the age-friendly study completed by the University of Guelph master's students, as well as the great work being done by our community partners such as Councils on Aging and some of our local municipalities. This would be done in partnership with corporate departments, local municipalities, and community partners. The strategy would provide a roadmap to guide not only the county, but also inform the work of local municipalities and their other community partners to help ensure that decisions and actions reflect and respond to the needs of the youth and older adults in our communities, and that we have a common vision going forward in terms of how we can address some of the issues that may come about with respect to our aging demographic and our out-migration of youth. We are recommending that this project would cost approximately $75,000, which would be funded from one-time funding reserve as well as potential federal provincial grants. So that's one highlight. Second one that is new, and this is something that probably is difficult to think about given that we are still in the process of finalizing our new official plan for the county. But what we are recommending is start setting aside some funds for a future update to the official plan. We anticipate the new official plan will be adopted in 2018 and then will be sent to the province for approval. With this being a new official plan, the official plan will not require an update for 10 years, being 2028. There could still be amendments, updates to the official plan throughout that 10-year period in order to respond to any changes that we are seeing in our communities, as well as to respond to provincial updates. It is prudent to set aside some money in order to prepare any background studies that may be required prior to the 2028 update. So it's recommended that $10,000 be set aside per year to fund these future background studies, with the studies anticipated to be completed in the 2 years prior to the update, which would be in 2026 and 2027. And that's all the highlights from the planning and trails portions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Randy? Yes, Councillor Eccles.
I guess it's on the trails portion. We've got a fair bit of money going in or being shown into major repairs, rehabilitation. You know, there's 50,000 in, 50,000 out every year.
Yep.
And then we've got 75,000 below that for the Trails Reserve. And I don't really see, you know, at the end of this 10 years, we've got 750,000 in there. We've got bridge replacement, culvert replacement, maintenance, capital in here, and then at the bottom, you've got 750,000 at the end of it. Are we buying a new trail, or where are we looking to?
No, we're not buying a new trail, but we are, based on the 2016 Bridge and Culvert Assessment Report. It recommended that the next few years there will be some replacements. However, it recommended that we start investing more in terms of the maintenance and ongoing repairs of our bridges and culverts in order to extend the life of those, rather than get to a point where we're having to replace those structures. We've been working with Bob Cherry, manager of our bridge crew, because he's our local expert in terms of bridge and culvert repairs. And he's working with us to identify what program and what's going to be required for those major repairs, not only this year, because we've got funds already set aside for this year, but years going forward. Based on what the estimates were out of that 2016 bridge and culvert assessment, I forget what the total was, but I think over the next 20 years, there was a projected major maintenance repairs at least over $1 million in terms of some of those structures. And that doesn't include the replacement costs items. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. With that, working with Kevin, we've updated our, we always had a 10-year kind of capital plan in behind the scenes for this project, or for this program. So we already had some numbers in place. We just updated those numbers to reflect this next 10-year capital. So what way it's structured is that $75,000 every year goes into a pot of money, into reserve. And then $50,000 of that is to be funded towards major maintenance and repair for culverts and bridges. And then also any replacements that are required are to be funded from that same reserve. So when we worked out looking at what we anticipate for replacements and major repairs, as well as updates to the bridge and culvert assessment every 5 years, et cetera, pretty much the reserve stays static. We need to continue to monitor that, though. Even this year again, we had a successful bid where we estimated that the bridge replacement was going to be, I think, $53,000, and it came in at $15,000. So we want to make sure that if we are still having great success in terms of our tenders, that we can maybe relook at some of these numbers going forward. But based on what we currently have, the numbers before us, and based on working with Bob and his crew, he feels that the numbers are accurate, and so we feel comfortable to keep it at the same level as what we're proposing. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer.
Thank you.
But they're not buying a trail yet.
But we're not buying a new trail.
Looks like we're keeping it up.
Yeah, that's the intent, is to now, through Bob's work, some of the ones that were identified for major repairs, replacement, he is recommending that we just replace some of those. Just based on the current condition and everything else, he thinks that replacement probably makes sense. But there's that sweet spot that you want to hit, that if there's some areas where you can do some major repairs now, it'll extend the lifespan of that bridge and culvert, and then we don't need to necessarily replace it for quite some time, hopefully. So that's what Bob and his team are looking at right now.
Is Councillor Eccles looks like he's satisfied with that explanation?
I've
Councillor-
heard the explanation.
Okay. He's received it for information.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Councillor McQueen.
Just to follow up on that, thank you, Mr. Warden. So when we're doing these replacements, currently, the use of the trail is either walking, snowmobile, or ATV. Very low weight, if it was a train, certainly the priority in certain things would be different.
Yes.
But when we replace these culverts and stuff, we can't see the future, but what happens if there was a new rail system going to Owen Sound or something else other than walking or ATV or snowmobile was being proposed? Would that mean that those people proposing would have to do an assessment of those culverts and stuff to make sure it meets what they're asking for? But secondly, what are we replacing them with, is in the sense of low weight or replacing to what was there?
It's a great question. We, at this stage, what we're replacing on is the need today, which would be the trail. So our heaviest piece of equipment probably going on the trail is the groomer for the snowmobile trails. In saying that, it could very well be what we're replacing today will also be adequate if rail were to ever return. We can't say with confidence that that is going to be the case. So no doubt, as you mentioned, that will have to be assessed in terms of those structures to see if any of those need to be replaced at that time. But we're, in terms of like actual depths, so we're putting them back, the structures, at the depths that they exist today, which were the depths that existed when rail were here. So from a depth perspective and structure perspective, again, some of those could likely be okay, but we can't guarantee that that's the case. And so, again, that will have to be assessed at that time.
That's a good answer. Councillor Mackey?
Thank you, Warden. Randy, when we're talking trails, so we're talking bridges and culverts, so that's primarily the old rail trails. What about the trails that exist in our county forests? Is there any money going into, small upgrades and maintenance of those trails?
Great question as well. We include those right now in our operational budget, so not in the capital budget. So there are some funds that we set aside for trail maintenance as well as any upgrades for our forest trails in our county forests on an annual basis. That's something that we may need to relook at and revisit once the recreational trails master plan's been completed. Just as an update on that, we do have a draft from the consultant. We're currently reviewing that, so we'll hopefully be able to share some information with council hopefully in the near future. So we may need to relook at that based on some of the recommendations from the recreational trails master plan in terms of looking at upgrading, for example, our signage, looking at how we can establish better parking areas and facilities in order for people to better utilize these trails. So there could be down the road some either it's part of the capital or future operational budget for those programs, but we do have some funds in our current budget for that today.
Thanks for that, Randy. You're on top of everything there. Okay. And Councillor Fosbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Randy. I'm not sure if it's an oversight, but on the heritage category, there's a few items that don't have source detail of where the money's coming from.
That one may be a Grey Roots question. I don't know if Kevin
Okay.
would be able to answer that one.
Right. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
You're off the hook on that one.
Okay.
Kevin? You got all the answers. Did you have, Councillor Frost, which one?
So if you take a look at the
Most-
heritage spreadsheet,
Yeah,
there's a couple of items that stand out with no source or source detail. The first one is Grey Roots Grey County Gallery update.
When they show just an amount, they're being
yeah.
funded from taxation at the bottom, so that, the other ones are showing that's like a project cost, and if they have others, they've been putting away money for reserves, you'll see from reserve, or if they're putting away to reserve for a future, they're saying to reserve, or there's partners. But if it's just a project with a line with an amount, it's being funded directly from the bottom taxation line then, okay?
Okay. Default is taxation. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so that covers section 1.
Yeah, and just to continue with heritage there, and I apologize, I didn't have anybody here from Grey Roots today, and I missed that, but the couple items are there, they're building automation, hardware and software needs updating. Ted Noble has given that. The carrier rooftop unit for the air conditioning for the admin portion of that building needs upgraded. And their theater upgrade, which needs done, is also been included in this budget. So if you need more specifics on that, I'll actually have to contact the staff. 'Cause
Okay.
I don't have that with me here right now, but.
I think
The
that's-
other item to finish off, planning community development, is tourism. It's a small item, but it's with a report being approved for the county purchasing the tourism vehicle. We're now going to put money away then for the replacement of that vehicle at the end of its life cycle. So that's something that's new into this plan, okay? So the next, we'll be moving now into the social services component, and the first thing up is Social Services Ontario Works and Childcare, and I'll let Barb Fetty.
Barb?
Good morning again. So we're a people service. We don't have very many capital expenditures, but we do have some. And you'll see that we are moving funds into capital reserve each year, and they are for specific things like our computer replacements. We are doing a laptop replacement in 2019, and then we move further into 2020 for the desktop replacements, and further out second screen replacements and whatnot. We also have some capital expenditures for the Early On Center in Hanover. And we did have some of those expenditures in the 2019 budget, but we've been doing some really strong reflection on whether we should be staying in the current building or where we should be actually holding our Early On services. So we've been working with the Board of Ed, both Boards of Ed in the town of Hanover. We're not planning to leave Hanover. We want to enhance our services, and we recognize that the building, although it was originally a childcare building, certainly things have changed over the years, and it's aging out. There are a lot of expenditures. So we've moved some of those expenditures from 19 into 20. You'll see that we've moved some flooring and some landscape. We've moved electrical, things that we thought that while we're in this exploratory stage, we would not be moving ahead with because they're not critical. We do have some things that we'll be working on, and they're more operational in nature. We'll be pulling from the reserve for that, for the Early On, and then certainly we contribute funding for accessibility, because if we were to stay there through our research, if in the end we end up staying there, we do need to make the building accessible. So there's been funds put away over the years for an elevator. Okay.
Thanks, Barb.
The other thing I would mention is that because there are a number of reserves within Children's Services, this year we are moving some funding under one capital reserve, taking it out from the Best Start reserve of $50,000 and another $150,000 from child care caseload, and just consolidating it to give us more flexibility coming into the next few years, depending on what we need those dollars for.
Okay, any questions of Barb? Don't see anything. Thanks, Barb. Okay, Kevin, who's up next?
Next will be long-term care, and I'll get Lynn Johnson to speak to those.
Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. I had completed a report that went to the Committee of Management on June 12th, so I'll give you an overview of what that was. There are several items that are consistent year over year, and that's our high-low beds, resident lifts, computers, that type of thing, and they're on a replacement cycle as we go through each year. We really focused in the report and really looked deep into the recent BCA Building Condition Assessment Report that we received this spring. I think it's spring or winter, I'm not sure which season I'm in right now, actually. So we looked at those new items that weren't previously in any of our submissions. So I'll just break it down really by home. Grey Gables, a new project there was a front door replacement for the cost of at a cost of $10,000 for 2019, and that door is aluminum and plate glass. It's out of alignment, and it's not as simple as going to the local store and picking up a door. It is linked with our fire alarm system, our wander guard system, all that type of thing. So that's a key project for that home next year. A retaining wall, we've been working away at it, trying to keep it there, and it does not need to be replaced next year at a estimated cost of $16,000. There's 3 other new projects over the next 2 or 3 years. One, a generator for 2020. The building has really maxed out on the size of generator that it was originally installed there, and that's just reflective of the increased acuity, more systems, more low air loss mattresses that are in place, oxygen, and all the things that have to be there for residents in order to survive should the power go out. And it's amazing how often we have those blips in power and rely on our generator. A hot water tank is scheduled for replacement in 2020, and 2021 it's recommended that we get going on repainting some of our interior walls. The home does do some preventative painting as they go through in resident areas, but the home has several vaulted ceilings which requires a team coming in with scaffolding, that type of thing, in order to reach those areas and do that painting. So it's not a simple project of just, bringing out the paintbrush and keeping caught up. Lee Manor, several things there. They've requested some blanket warmers for installation. That home deals with a lot of responsive behaviors, and warm blankets are seen as a real soothing thing for residents. It can calm and reduce those behaviors. It's also a great intervention for pain and several other things. So they're requesting the purchase of some blanket warmers that would be available on the nursing home areas for staff to be able to provide that comfort measure for residents. They had some caulking and sealing previously, and this is a good one in the sense that it had been previously budgeted for $55,000, and they under the new BCA and home inspection that the staff have done, that they're recommending $12,000 be completed next year with future budgeting for more caulking. It is not all necessary in 2019. We require $35,000 for some replacement of the home area refrigerators. There's 5 of those, plus a holdover refrigerator in the main kitchen. There's some driveways and sidewalk repairs. That's $3,000 over what we had previously budgeted. A mechanical air makeup system of $80,000. That was budgeted for this year, 2018, and we're going to be pushing that forward into next year. We engaged the services of an engineer to really get the specifics there and know what that project's about, and we are quite confident with that one for next year now. A new project is courtyard renovations, and a few years ago, and I don't have that date with me right now, the home undertook major renovations in the main courtyard. So when you go straight in the building, directly behind there's a large courtyard. These courtyards were never renovated during the home renovations in 2016, and they're concrete slabs. They're uneven over the course of 30 years or 35 or 40 years. Limited shade and limited activities for residents. So I think it was about 3 years ago now, we underwent major renovations in the one main courtyard. It involved improving drainage, in putting some raised flower beds in place, having shelters from the sun, and it's really quite rewarding now when you go to the home and you see the residents sitting out there knitting, visiting with families, doing their gardening, whatever that is. So there is one other area that we're proposing that it be completed, and right now we do not use that area for residents. There's a barbecue out there that the kitchen staff will use or allow families to use if they want to do something. It is hot. It's the area that you look over the hill out here and you see it's fenced in, no sun, and it's quite a wet area, the hill. There's several springs in there, and we have some challenges there. So that would be a project they'd like to undertake next year based on the outcome of the first garden area and the enjoyment it does bring for the residents, and this would definitely be an enhancement. 2020 to 21, it's going to be about $15,000 to $20,000 annually for some kitchen replacements, and that's based on end of life for this equipment and what we saw in the new BCA. And in 2020, we need to start replacing some of the hallway flooring, and we had it in our budget previously at $75,000, and a newer price and probably a truer price for what we're seeing right now would be $90,000. Rockwood Terrace, we only developed the capital for that home up till 2025 because we know that something has to happen there by then. You will see when you look at the worksheet that we've continued to carry over some costs for fixed things such as IT and those types of things, because no matter what type of home we have, we're still going to need those articles. It's just some of the building upgrades, we don't know what that will be. So for 2019, new for them is $35,000 for the replacement of a steamer and a blixer and a warming unit for the kitchen. They have a requirement to update some medical equipment in 2019 and the second piece of medical equipment in 2020, as well as a chair that's for responsive behaviors. It's an intervention that you would use. BCA recommends the elevator coating being updated in 2021 at a cost of $11,000, and that's a basic maintenance upgrade that needs to happen when you have an elevator. And then they have a couple blanket warmers right now, I believe. I know they have at least one, and they want to implement some more in the home in 2021 as well. So that is the update for the new projects for long-term care for the next 2 or 3 years.
Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Questions of Lynn at this time? Doesn't appear to be any. Thank you very much, Lynn. Kevin?
Shaw will now walk you through housing and the notable items there.
Okay.
So just for an update on the new or the projects that we've moved around for housing. Looking at the top 4, they're exterior doors, patio doors, or the patios themselves. These are projects that we have moved around in various years, past years, to try and make that bottom line meet. We're getting to a point where we can't just keep putting them off, and we need to insert them back into our capital. A lot of the doors that I believe I was here talking about them at the last council when we applied for the Green Ontario funds. They are wooden doors and in need of replacement. So we are inserting those back into within the next couple of years. The generator we have moved out for 1 year, and again, that just being, being conscious of that bottom line. We are striving to have 1 generator in each community, so there would be 1 in Hanover, 1 in Durham, even though we have multiple buildings, and putting them in the building with our largest common room. We do have a number of tenants who are on oxygen, or their scooter might require the ability to be charged, and also a warming station for them. And the next 3 are Golden Town, so these are the capital repairs that would be needed for Golden Town in 2019. This coming, of course, from the reserve funding from Golden Town. And looking at windows, Golden Town did apply for the SHEEP funding, Social Housing Energy Efficiency Program, and were successful in getting some windows replaced, but not all of them. And that was in 2015, I believe. And so we would like to continue with the remaining windows and getting those replaced because they are at the end of their life. And the other is the lighting in the common areas. So we have 1 building in which the lighting does need to be replaced and would be replaced with LED lighting. That's it for new items.
Questions of Anne Marie? Seeing none, thanks, Anne Marie. Okay, Kevin.
Now moving into the transportation and public safety component, and first up there will be paramedic services, and I'll let Kevin McNabb speak to a couple items there.
So for paramedic services, the first one is the Chatsworth base. In 2018, we originally budgeted $56,000 for the debenture payment, but based upon the new tender amount, the payment now is $70,996 per year after 2018 to be paid off over 13 years. And then also, this is from the building condition assessment, just to look at the security system, which is the FOB system. Again, just like anything, the BCA will look at that at the time and see if it needs replaced. If it does need replaced, we'll carry on with it. It does, we do have that FOB system in other bases throughout the county, so we'll have to look at that at the time as well. We did look at our stretchers and our power loads, which are fairly pricey items that we replace on a regular basis. And just what we're hearing from the industry, we're looking at going to be able to refurbish our power loads. So we hope to be able to run them through a second generation, keeping the bulk of the steel and the components that are costly, and refurbish the boards and the hydraulics and stuff like that. And that's roughly going to save us half the price, but maybe around $12,000. So you'll see it drop under vehicles. And the stretchers, they have between a 7 and 10 year replacement cycle. And just, again, back to the level of maintenance that we have on these stretchers, we push that to 10 years as well.
Questions of Kevin while he's up? Yes, Councilor McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I see with regards to the debenture of Chatsworth, but any thought in the near future of 10 years or less about other sites?
We're still looking at the data on that, looking at call volumes and stuff. We have talked about in that area in the southeast portion, corner of it there, but there has been no, we haven't went down that road yet, but that's something to talk about in the future.
Thanks for that. Okay, Kim.
And last but not least is transportation services with Pat Hoy. And so this is where the biggest component of your tax dollars get directed to is our roads and bridges and housing. So I'll let Pat walk through.
Welcome, Pat.
I always seem to get this right before lunch time slot, and I have a lot to say, but I don't want to keep you from lunch, or myself.
You're between us and lunch, right?
Anyway, so this is, the 10-year plan for us. It was a pretty big undertaking going from 5 to 10 year. Now, a lot of the projects, we kind of had a pseudo 10-year anyway. We had jobs that we would end up pushing off the 5-year, and they were kind of hanging around out there just outside our horizon. So at least we kind of had a decent idea of what's kind of coming down. But I wanted to thank Matt and Joanna, Graham, and Dennis and Clarika in our office. They did a lot of work on these plans, and it's pretty time consuming. So I'm just going to go over three. We're into kind of three areas, basically construction, resurfacing, and minor capital, domes and depots, and machinery. So I'll start with the construction, resurfacing, and minor capital. And basically in your, I've got the map. For those of you that have the map in your package, did we get the map in the package? Yeah. Few changes this year. We put the municipality borders back on the map. Aside from maybe the pinks and oranges looking a little close, it's kind of maybe hard to tell who's who. Oh, this is my other map. Okay, so this is another story. So we have our 10-year capital map in the program. And basically, it's a static map that Dennis created with all our 10-year stuff on here highlighted. He's got the years in different colors. 10-year map, you better not go more than 10 years because we're running out of colors. We don't have any colors left. He's got the 10-year bridges on here and 10 years intersections. We kind of separated the intersections out of the capital jobs just because they seem to, they're kind of their own beast. And sometimes we end up doing the whole roadway with the exception of the intersection. Then we'll come back a year later and do the intersection. So we really don't look at, as far as the municipal borders being on here, they're just for kind of an ease of understanding. We look at the system as a whole. We're not trying to even anything up, you know, we're looking at our system as a whole. So it's just kind of for quick reflection because a lot of times, you know, the municipal borders are a little, you kind of forget exactly where they are because they're kind of in and out. But the other thing we've done this year, you'll see on the map, all the gray areas. That's everything we've done since 2013. So Dennis went back through our old tenders, and this is kind of part of our ongoing asset management. And just, it's nice to see on there what you've done and what you haven't done. The peculiar thing about it is just there's some little areas where, Grey Road 31, for example, we pulverized and paved it, put a new lift on, but we're going back in 2027 to put another lift on. And it doesn't really show, if you have a really clear hard copy, you can kind of see that there's another gray in the background. So that's the only thing this doesn't really show. The other thing that Sean Roberts in IT has created for us, and it's up on the screen there now, it's kind of, because the problem with this map is it's static, it's a great reference tool, but maybe 6 months after our 10-year plan gets approved, we realize that one job is so complicated, it probably is not going to go, like what happened with Katie, you know, municipal things come up and you realize it's not going to go. So then the rest of the year, you're kind of looking back at this map and thinking, oh, you kind of got to remember in your mind that that one's not going. And the public sees it and they're saying, oh, is this still going next year? And we don't really want to go in and update this map all the time. So Sean has created this for us. Brutal without a mouse. There's no mouse here. Maybe I might have to get someone from IT to come up. I really cannot do it without a mouse because I don't know where my left click is. And you want to come up, Jody? I think Sean's going to be here. Yeah, well, I like a mouse. So anyway, what Sean has done first, he's kind of created this interactive. Oh, there it is. All right, I'm okay now. All right, I've had this conversation with my kids quite a bit. So what is involved in this? Again, he's got a little timeline thing here, and basically you can drag and see kind of what's going on. There's kind of the full breadth of it. So the old gray ones are on there. What hasn't been done yet, these are actually, the colors are defined by the type of project. So whether it's a pulverize and pave, this Grey Road 2 is a microsurface here. 31 is an overlay in the green. So that's kind of, he's got some symbols here. Intersections, he's got this symbol here. And bridges are this symbol here, which I always show my age because I said, that looks like a phone to me. But I don't think he knew what I was talking about. And then he's got it so you can click on the project, and then it comes up with your information. So you see it's 15.5 kilometers long, start date 2019. So this will be a link that is shared with everybody, eventually the public, I'm sure. It just gives a chance to kind of look in your municipality what's going on. If we had something where a road probably wasn't going to go, it'd be worth updating this. As this is a form, a planning document, not necessarily a council-approved plan, it would kind of be handy for people to go on here and see what's going on. So here we have, the Dundalk intersection down here. Some of the urbans, you kind of got to zoom in to see what's going on. And zoom right in. We're not doing anything in Chesley. There's Scone. I don't want to talk about Scone. I shouldn't have zoomed in there. Anyway, so that's kind of our newest planning tool that we'll be sending the link to everyone to kind of look around and see what's on the 10-year and what projects are going. So thanks to Sean for kind of hacking through this on us. He did it in about a week, so there's some refinements to go here as far as us double checking everything. We haven't kind of got through it all yet, but we're pretty happy with that. It's just so easy to use to go in and compared to using an old static map. So that's one big thing. Another thing, Kevin went over our assumptions, gas tax and OSIF. OSIF, we've kind of left where it is. If it drops, of course, we'll have to reevaluate. So that's just something, there's not much you can do about that. So the other thing assumptions we've made is as far as road exchanges and connecting links, we didn't put those in here either. We are really positive on both those initiatives that they're going to happen. We'd like them to happen. We think it's the right thing. But we just went through and did the program as is. So that'll all have to be addressed in a subsequent report. So, and the other thing we did was a couple other things. We used current prices. So you'll see in Kevin's report, a lot of the values have gone up because asphalt jumped so high this year. So going forward, I guess it could drop, doubt it, but we've kind of left that current price. We've done a lot more urban work the last few years. We're getting a better price, better unit understanding of how big, expensive those urbans can be. And the other thing we've done, because we're at 10 years, we started incorporating inflation. So that job in 2029 will have 2% added to it in today's dollars in 2029, rather than every year really being 2% less than it's actually going to be someday. So we just assumed 2% for that. So as well, two lifts. We're all in on the two lifts finally. Modern pavement design. We're really seeing a difference in the road we've done with two lifts, and our paved shoulder initiative as well. So, and you really notice the two lift effect, or just the effect of building a road the right way when you kind of look at the entire 10-year plan and you see. Even though it's one of our highest volume roads, how infrequently we get back to fix Grey Road 4. So that was a road that was built, fantastic granulars and multiple lifts of asphalt. So it really lasts for a long time. And the other thing about two lifts is you can always go back and recycle. If you have 2 inches of asphalt, it starts cracking. There's really nothing you can do. I mean, you do crack sealing and try to keep it. You can maybe throw something on top if you do it soon enough, but we find with the thicker lift roads, we have the cold in place that we can go back and recycle, and it's a pretty good value for money, so there's a lot of those in there. All right, I'm just going to go over a few changes. I'm on the package now, say page 4. Really, the only change that we've kind of added in the, other than a few dollar amounts and years flipping in and out here and there, was we did put $100,000 in for land acquisitions every year. We're finding more and more with all Lacey's work that there's a lot of land that we don't own that we should own, and a lot of widenings we never got, and a lot of just peculiar stuff that needs to be straightened up. So we didn't really want to get to the point where all that land acquisition money comes out of each project, because it really is something that needs to be addressed as far as how long our corridors or how wide our corridors are going to be. I'll go on to page 5 here. I'll just quickly go through the 2019 projects. I can zoom on the map here. So we got Gray Road 2. The wheel doesn't work on this one. I'm complaining more about this mouse, but the wheel doesn't work. So we've got 300,000 microsurfacing. So that is just basically it's kind of a patch to hold it. We're going to put some micro on it. There's some cracking. It's widespread enough that we're just going to try to hold it until we can get back to it in the future. We've got Gray Road 4, the intersections at 10th and 18th in Hanover. The plan there is to do a traffic count as soon as the school opens, and just kind of decide exactly. It'll be a pretty standard set of signals, I would think, with a left turn coming from the east, and possibly a right, and depending, there could possibly be right and left coming north, I would think, out of where the school is. You probably wouldn't want someone waiting too long to turn right, so I would assume there'd be that, but we haven't kind of got to that point yet, but that'll be something we're starting in September. The intersection at the bottom of the hill here in front of the county building, for any coming from the north, you know, you get stuck at that left turn. There's been a lot of accidents there. Not necessarily the intersection's fault, but you just can't see around that other car. We're trying to get opposing lefts there with paint, basically. We're going to paint another lane in there. So we're working with the city on that one. Gray Road 9, very big job in Dundalk. We haven't done anything in Dundalk in a long, long time. I think maybe 94 is when the drawings were from. So it's been quite a while. We walked through just on Friday. That is going to be a pretty complicated job to get finished for 2019. The consultant is going pretty hardcore on it. Their staff's working hard, but we're putting it in there. Southgate's trying to get some funding. If they get the funding, obviously it's going to try to be a go. If it got postponed for a year, we could put that money in reserve and then work on it that way. So there's a lot to do in Dundalk. The 2 Gray Road 15 jobs, just in Owen Sound with their pumping station, we just had a report on that job. And then farther out near Annan, they're slated to go for next year, and they will go next year. One's with a consultant now, the other one we're doing in-house. Finally, well, not finally, but second last, Gray Road 40, very big job. Kind of been in the works for quite a while. There it is on the map there, 15.5 kilometers. So that is our big job for next year. It's being designed currently right now. And then just on the next page, on to page 6, is the bridge in Holstein, which is going to go next year. It's with a consultant right now. So the price actually dropped a bit on it, our estimated price, based on previous structures. Structure prices are actually pretty good compared to what we're expecting on some of them. So that will be a bit of an inconvenience for the town of Holstein. We were going to have a pedestrian bridge open, but the town will be kind of closed down for traffic for a few months. So it was just one of those things where if you were going to try to do half at a time because of where it is, and it's kind of tied in with some buildings that are there, you're probably looking at $400,000 extra fees. So we're assuming that the bridge is going to be closed. The design's not completed yet, but. Okay, that's about, I think, it for construction resurfacing and minor capital. If anybody has questions.
Yeah.
Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So just a quick question. When you said 2% inflation, is that per year? Okay. I thought so. I just want to make sure because you said 2029, but thank you.
Councillor Pringle, then
Mr.
Councillor.
Warden, Pat, just wondering about the land acquisition fund. I know there's some talk, and the talk will come back, of County Road from 1640 all the way to Mennonite Corner. That will be coming back probably for discussion. But that fund will, am I reading it right then? It is $1 million fund over 10 years. So if that was to be turned over, agreement made, that fund would be there to buy that land, needed land on each side of that road all the way to the next one.
Yeah, I won't get into specific projects, but yeah, it basically is to buy our land going forward for what we think our corridor should be, yeah.
Councillor McQueen and then Councillor McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and to you, Pat. Thank you very much for explaining what you're doing. I guess the quick question is it's a guide depending on road conditions. I know last winter, really that heavy frost really put a lot of stress on our roads. And are you finding that the double layer is going to prove out better than a single layer, even with that heavy cold weather we had like after Christmas there? Because I noticed some roads that were done 2 years ago, and that really put a stress on some of the asphalt roads that are only 2 years old. You can see some deterioration and stuff, so I don't know if they even last 11 years before you get to the next layer. But anyway, I guess I guess they get all your roads get like an assessment every year type of thing?
Yeah, we do a full pavement condition index assessment every year.
Okay.
The other thing we're doing, and we do believe, I mean, 2 lifts is modern pavement design with the size of trucks now. The other thing that we have a tender out currently for is a falling weight deflectometer on all our half-load roads. So basically, we've tasked the consultant to tell us, should this be half-loaded or not? Because we're having a hard time taking half-loads off. The one more thing you have to enforce, they're hard to enforce. But we're just trying to we get a lot of geotechnical information as well. So we've been trying to figure out better what our bases are. That seems to be where some of the mystery is. You're never sure exactly what's down there. So Matt Mark puts out a tender every year to basically take boreholes and do some geotech study on everything that was in our 5-year plan. So we just have a better idea of, putting 2 lifts on a bunch of organics wouldn't matter in a way, so.
So just to follow up on that, when we go out to tender, we generally take the lowest tender. But when you go to a local fair, you always pick the best. And I guess my point is do you somehow keep track of contractor A, B, and C and the quality that they're doing and how many returns there are? Because I know we hold money back and we have to go back and patch or fix something that's brand new, which there's areas, to me, it's sometimes you want it's not always the lowest price, but it's the best quality, and I guess that's all in our quality assurance or quality control or overseeing that, I guess maybe we're always trying to improve that too. But remember, we always want the best like the fair, right? So I don't have any comment.
Yeah, I mean, we're in that place where the lowest bid is typically accepted. Now, we do a contractor rating every year if one was poor enough. I mean, it's something we would consider doing. In fact, we recently just got rid of a contractor on one job, a minor capital job, but which I can't remember us doing before. But yeah, it's our quality assurance and our inspectors that are supposed to make sure everything is as per the spec. And if someone's not doing it, then there's fines in there. We have our rating system. The thing we don't have is, which MTO used to have way back when, but I'm not sure if they still do. You could bid more if you had a better rating. They had a kind of a balance that way. But that was very hard to administer because people are appealing their rating. Is the rating personal? Is someone just give lower ratings? So it's a very hard thing to get into. Like they did it for consultants, I remember when I was a consultant, but otherwise, typically we have 2 contractors. We're just really on them. We have 2 inspectors on all our jobs right now. Plus we have a lead hand inspector that makes sure everything's going fine. So it's just us really.
So if you had 10 miles of road and you had 20 repairs versus another contractor that had 2, obviously that's going to have some reflection on memory.
Right. I mean, there is a warranty too. So we do our post-construction warranties a year later and anything that comes up there. I know what you mean, that those issues that come up in 7 or 8 years, it might not even be the contractor's fault anyway. It might be some subsurface problem we don't know. Those are hard to kind of figure out what's coming. But
Thanks for that, Councillor McKean. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I won't get into
Contractor ratings?
anything to do with contractor ratings or any of that type of thing. Been there, done that. I would like to maybe have, I don't know, Pat, or if Kevin could answer. Can you give me just a Coles Notes version of what some of these projects are listed be funded through development, Cat 1 and Cat 2 and Cat 3? Just exactly what that means as far as the development charges, and is there different reserve funds?
They do break them down under the road construction part by a category 1 is really like a a new project altogether, where number 3, I think, is an intersection improvement. Number 2 is a betterment to an existing, like you take a road and you change the profiles and stuff to handle more growth on it and stuff like that. That's how the consultant has broke down the development charges in that. It's still part of the transportation reserve. They're rolled up together, but they break them down, I think, probably just to ease to break apart which ones are totally new, something designed with an urban design with 4 lanes or something like that would be a category 1, versus taking something that maybe a surface treatment and making it a paved road would be an upgrade of the design to handle. That's how they're differentiated by the consultant. That's what those are, category 1, 2, 3. I think there's 6 altogether.
Okay, thanks for that explanation.
Thanks for that. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Pat, I'm not going to get into any finger pointing or blame, but we had a transportation master plan that was done how many years ago?
Starting in 11.
Okay, and that was brought forward to Grey County, and I'm not going to ask you how many of those initiatives have been developed, but it was suggested in there that there could be some trades of some roads made. I remember the one in the township of Meaford, and I know there's one significant one that could happen at the bottom end of the county, an extension of number 9 going straight across. I do know that the chunk of road from Meaford out to the Grey Bruce line is going to be developed next year. And just wondered if some of those things would be taken into consideration, or when can we expect something? And also, in fact, I guess I'm going to look at the connecting links, when some of those are going to be enacted on.
So all those items kind of went into, a lot of them, and things in the master plan, a couple things that weren't, went into our working groups. So connecting links, road exchanges specifically, Anthony Gibbons in our office and myself have been working on. We're hoping something by October area, not great timing, I know, but something to bring forward to go after those road exchanges. We're pretty supportive of them. There's some money issues there where there's some now needs on some of those exchanges, on both sides, but that's kind of where that is. Connecting Link is a little farther behind that. Again, it always comes down to trying to figure out how the money would work for everybody. So without, we don't want to completely debilitate our program and just dominate it with all you're doing is a township road you assumed for 2 years, right? So that's kind of where we're at, is working through those numbers. We've got pretty good assessments on those roads now and some good estimates on construction, and we're just trying to figure out how it would kind of fit in here. So yeah, this whole plan would really, really change when those items go through.
Understand that, okay, a little bit at a time. All right, thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Fossbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This might be more relevant to Kevin. So when you talked about the 1% annual taxation, for lack of a better word, supplement to fund all of this, so is that what's funding this? And then what's the impact on the reserves at the end of that 10-year span? Because it's one or the other, right?
First of all, yeah, we've added, I think it was 92% of 1% into construction is what we've done for the assets, based on the asset management plan. So that's why you're seeing the taxation amounts for transportation going up every year significantly. So that's trying to address that. Reserves and stuff, we're taking, between Joanne and Mary Lou and other finance staff, we've looked at these 10-year plans and looked at the projects being funded from reserves and the amount of money going in to make sure that if they go negative, they're only going negative for like a year or 2 at the most, that corporately the reserves then can stay in balance, and then we start building them back up. So that's what we're also using this 10-year for, is looking at it against our reserve fund study then to see, making sure that these projects and their costs, that we're not using reserves and we don't have any money in essence. So that's been done.
So you mentioned a reserve fund study. Is that something that?
Part of the building conditions, each one of those, for example, it showed it had a present value for all the building components based on today being replaced and what year they're being replaced, so they had today's value, and then they used a 2% component per inflation, and that would give us a future value spreadsheet, and then those future values then were showed against the reserves coming out on those years, and that was the third document, part of those BCA, and they called it a reserve fund study.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, yes, John.
Thank you. Just one other thing, I'm just looking at the map, and I think that whenever we're, looking at the projects, to access some of the businesses, and, and I'll go to the roundabout on 21 and 19, and the other part of the town line being done hopefully next year. And that short little section of blue that's on that map, when you have the access to the Blue Mountain Resort shut off for basically, the whole summer, if there'd be some consideration done to do that one too, so that when you're done that section, you're not back to it in 6 or 7 years and limiting the access again, because once you close off that intersection to get into the resort, it'd be nice to have had ductwork all done at one time, so that one summer's construction season would be would complete it. And there may be some economics and scale in having a contractor look at that too. So that's just a comment.
Okay. Okay, so Pat, now we're on to section 2, which is facilities, depots, and domes.
Yeah, generally this uses the building condition assessments to set up our repairs that are due in the domes and depots. So that being said, we do consult with staff a lot. Just because the BCA said something doesn't mean we're necessarily, things are variable. You think your windows are going to need to be done at a certain time. It's not necessarily going to be that year. So we do have a lot of discussions. We're not blindly following the BCA, but the largest thing to bring your attention to is on page 12, and this is a subsequent report today. The transfer to Patrol D facility reserve. We have $2 million there to transfer out of our equipment reserve into the Patrol D reserve. So basically that's report 1818 today after lunch, but just taking $2 million out of our equipment reserve to fund our new Patrol D depot proposed. So that's just why that's there. We just thought it would seem odd to put your whole 10-year capital forecast ignoring what you're recommending in half an hour. So that's why that's there. But otherwise, it's stuff mostly from the BCA and things we notice. Again, we made a few things here. I know Graham went through the construction schedule, and if he was paving the lot in Clarksburg, he put it at the same time as a paving job in the area. So just trying to get some economies of scale that way. So that is basically what is going on with the domes and depots.
Okay, that's good. Machinery.
Machinery on page 13. Again, same thing. All our machines, when we buy them, have a certain life. 12 years for a tandem and those types of things. So Joanna basically has the entire life of every machinery that we own on a spreadsheet to make sure that our reserve will be high enough, make sure we're contributing enough, make sure our charge out rates, since we charge out equipment to ourselves, is the right rate. So again, 2 times a year fleet meeting where we go over, Marty kind of tells us which vehicle probably we shouldn't keep around and which one has really performed way beyond our expectations. So there's some variability in a year or two that way. But generally, we kind of stick with our equipment schedule. It's worked well for us. We had a few years there where we weren't buying much, so we have 4 tandems for next year, loader backhoe, half tons, the Ontario Works van, and the loader mower. So yeah, we're just keeping going on our equipment plan, and it seems to work quite well for us. So,
Councillor Barfoot.
Just a question, Pat. The smaller graders that we're buying then for the shouldering and that, can we use that for snow plowing though?
So the plan is right now we're having the 2 larger graders that we still use for snow plowing and just the 1 smaller one. So yeah, the smaller one really isn't for snow plowing. We can't really go all small, or all we could do is shoulder with them. So our plan now is to still have the 2 large graders for doing the snow plowing, and they do shouldering as well. But yeah, that's kind of our plan right now. Now maybe I don't know if that would change or what, but we still use a lot the 2 large snow plows for winging quite a bit.
Okay, any other questions on equipment? Okay. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, everybody, for that. Kevin, any other comments on this?
Just that first of all, this is our first production of a 10-year plan, so if you're looking at some of the detail sheets and you get fairly far out on the plan, they're not well developed yet. And we'll just keep working away at this. And I know Pat and a few others have mentioned, Joanna and Mary Lou have been very helpful getting this done and putting together. There's been lots of hours spent on it. As well, I'd like to thank, you're not seeing it, but in behind this is a software application that Matt Taylor from our IT department has built for this, that we actually enter the numbers into a project sheet. It then builds our spreadsheets for us and builds corporate spreadsheets. So it took him a bit of time to figure out finance logic with two reserves, from reserves, partner funding and all that. I'm sure he doesn't want to come work for finance at all now, but he's created a very slick little software for us that'll help us do this 10-year plan. So I wanted to pass that on. And Jody, if you could pass that on to Matt, I'd really appreciate that, because he even one night we were having a bug, we were trying to get this all together at the last minute. He drove in from Shallow Lake and fixed it for us, so I'm very appreciative of that. So again, I think it provides a good tool to forecast for the future where we're headed here and the increases we're looking at based on what we know today and stuff. So it's a good planning tool. And I appreciate feedback. If you want more time spent on this, maybe we can look at next year budgeting, a longer period of time just strictly on 10-year capital or something like that. But I think it's a step. We're working away at it here in finance, trying to get somewhere. So.
Well, you're taking 1 year at a time, but you're projecting. So each year you'll project out another year, so.
That's right.
Okay. Any further questions, discussion? All right, I'll call the motion. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. I guess we can break for lunch now.
Yeah, we are. There's no furniture.